What's the ultimate petty revenge that you've seen or been a part of? You young'uns here might not believe it, but back in the early 90s, supermarket cashiers had to type every price by hand. I was at a Vons in San Diego, walking towards the only open check stand with a single bottle of soda in my hand. Suddenly, this hoity-toity lady with a cart, stacked to the top, flew out of one of the aisles like a freight train and cut me off. "I'm in a hurry," she said, and then looked away like she was annoyed that I'd been born. I looked at the cashier. He rolled his eyes and got to work. 5 minutes later, she's walking out of the door and it's my turn. "You're good," says the cashier. "I put your soda on her tag." Damn, that felt good. I used to deliver pizza for Domino's. It was my last shift, and there was this house that was always rude, never tipped. Once I called to ask what the house looked like, and they said, "I gave you the address," and just hung up. Always stuff like that. I got to their house and they gave me a check for 1 cent less than the total was. I said, "I'm gonna need that extra penny." They grumbled and took their time, hoping I'd give up, but I just sat there, holding the pizza. They came back all angry and gave me the penny. You should note that they had no intention of tipping. After they gave me the penny, I chucked it onto the street and left. They saw me do it, and it was satisfying. I delivery drive, and we have this problem house that these 2 girls live at that always try and underpay and play it off by accident. We've been delivering to them for well over a year. It's really sad. Anyway, one of the drivers had enough of their bullcrap and said to them, "You know, you're almost $1 off, but I can tell you need it, so I'll let it slide." They were definitely teed off, but they still order from us quite a bit. I knew a kid in elementary school. He jumped across a table and tried to choke me out. I got suspended for instigating it by saying he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs when that was the only thing that kid ever talked about, and he was wearing a Cocoa Puffs shirt that day. Senior year of high school, that same kid was in my design class. He needed to get a C or better on the final. Over the year, I found out the kid was taking work off my shared drive. High school IT was dumb, and each kid's folder was public. The kid was straight up copying me. So for the final, I purposefully effed up the drawing in my folder, but that kid didn't double-check it. He turned it in and failed and had to go back and be a super senior. In short, kid choked me out, I waited 10 years and then made them fail high school. There was this kid, about 15, who cut in front of me at the supermarket. When he wasn't watching, I broke his chocolate bar while still inside the wrapper. Later I saw him cycling by, opening his bar, and half of it fell out. He threw a tantrum and I chuckled. That went from being mildly inconvenient to actually really good revenge, and pretty much proportionate to his crime against you. Good job. I occasionally deliver pizza as a part-time job. There's a customer that tends to pay with a big bag of change. And I don't mean a bag full of quarters, I mean a bag full of dimes, nickels, and pennies. Since his meal typically costs him about $20, the bag usually weighs several pounds. It is a pain to count out all of the change, so typically drivers will just assume he has the correct amount and leave. Usually he has just enough or maybe a few cents over. I don't think it's an innocent thing either, as he usually gives a big bag of change with a crap-eating grin. It's such a pain that most of the drivers know his address by heart and avoid going to his house at all if possible. I was having a bad night, and by the luck of the draw I got this guy's house. I remember reading a post on the Petty Revenge Reddit involving someone paying in a checkout line with a bag of change, and I knew I could use a similar method to take my frustration out on this guy in the pettiest way possible. I pulled up to his house and left the pizza in the car. I rang the doorbell, and when he answered, I saw the large bag of change in his hand that I knew would be there. He asked where his pizza was, and I said, "New policy, sir. Gotta count it all out before we can give out the pizza." So I sat down on his doorstep and started to count out all the change. At one point, I even asked if he could turn on his porch light because I was having a hard time seeing. He did end up sitting there while I counted out the entire bag of change, even though it took about 10 minutes. He ended up being about $1 over, so I started picking up pennies to give him his change back. He then said I could keep the rest as a tip. When I gave him his pizza, he sheepishly told me sorry and then shut the door. The whole situation was incredibly awkward, and to my knowledge, he hasn't ordered pizza from us in a while. Oh well. A girl on my softball team bullied me and spread rumors about me to the team and coaches. We were competing for the same position. She was in my geometry class and tried to buddy up to me because I was good at geometry, and she wasn't. So for a while, I let her copy my homework, and then one day I gave her all the wrong answers and turned in the right answers for myself. My roommate in college was a selfish jerk. Now, I've known him since preschool, and we're still friends, but he's one of those people you can't live with. He attended the local tech school that's supposed to be a pipeline into the main school that third roommate and I attended. However, he barely went to class and sat around smoking doobies and playing Xbox. My Xbox specifically, which is where this story begins. He used to have friends over all the time, and mostly they'd just get baked and play Xbox in the living room. Now, I don't like having a TV in my bedroom, so I set up my flat screen and Xbox in the living room. I'd like to note that both he and a third roommate had Xboxes as well, but they had theirs set up in their respective rooms. When the latest Call of Duty at the time came out, we'd spend hours playing together in a big squad. That is until the third roommate's Xbox got the red ring of death. Shortly after, my Xbox got the red ring of death. Well, we think that's all good because jerk roommate has the next Xbox 360 and that wasn't prone to the same issue. We'll just move his Xbox out to the living room so we can keep playing COD Zombies, right? The response the third roommate and I got was, and I quote, "Nah, I don't want people playing it all the time because it'll probably break. Plus, what if you and the third roommate are playing it and I want to play it by myself?" We were livid. How could he spend all of that time using my stuff and not extend the same courtesy? My real gripe wasn't that I couldn't use his Xbox, it was because we no longer would sit down as three friends, crack some beers, and laugh, having fun trying to beat each other's high round score in Zombies. It was like us being social together stopped because he wanted to play Modern Warfare 2 by himself and just shut us out. At the time, I'd supplied the router for internet in the house, which meant I alone had the admin password. I found out you can block specific MAC addresses. Well, guess who couldn't connect to Xbox Live when he wanted to play online? I'd turn it on and off sporadically over the next few weeks. I found out he spent like 4 hours calling both Time Warner and Microsoft trying to get the issue resolved. Eventually, he started to put 2 and 2 together about it when I'd go out and come back. You'd think I'd stop, but I adapted. I found out you could open a port to remotely access your router from the internet. At the time, I had a BlackBerry, I know, which could load the HTML router configuration page. Thus, I started turning off his access when I was home. I was even away one weekend at our rival school, and I shut him down 3 hours away. To this day, he still doesn't know it was me. I still go over to his house and hang out on the weekends. Screw you, dude. I know they taught us sharing in preschool. And to those saying I was the jerk in the situation, I think you're confused that this was some sort of revenge or friendship-ending act when it was really just me elaborately pranking a friend of 20+ years. Yes, he was a jerk in the sense that he was still immature in a lot of ways because he'd never lived on his own, he never cleaned, did his part in the household. He's cool now that life smacked him around a bit, he just needed to grow up at the time. My roommate and her significant other loved doing elaborate jigsaw puzzles. After I found out she cancelled our lease, leaving me 1 week to find a new place to live, which she could do because I was 17 and not able to legally sign a lease, I threw away one piece of 2 different puzzles that they were working on. When me and my ex-fiancée were having a bunch of arguments after we broke up, I got tired of her constantly texting me about nonsense, so I call insert phone carrier here to have them cut off service to her phone that I paid for in the middle of an argument. Not the most mature post we've had, although I suppose mature and petty rarely line up together, do they? And you were well within your right to do so. It would be even more petty if she immediately joined another phone service just to keep going at you. My neighbor's dog craps in our yard all the time. It wouldn't be a big deal except he never cleans up after her. I finally had enough, so I decided to go with a classic. I put a flaming bag of this dog's crap on his porch, rang the bell, and hid in the bushes. When he answered the door, I finally got my revenge by having an affair with his wife that lasted for 3.5 years. My sister said some pretty mean things to me in front of my friends when I was younger, so I put a slice of bologna in her Walkman CD player. I got the idea from Corey in the show That's So Raven. Early in a game of Civilization 5, Alexander stole Petra from me at the last second. So I built a special city in the frozen wastes, blocked it with my own cities, gifted it to him, and then burned the rest of his empire to the ground. It took about 5 hours. I like to think he learned his lesson, but that Ford-settling D-bag still looks as smug as ever. My little brother and his girlfriend came to stay at my house for the weekend, and the girlfriend was super self-centered and obnoxious. When they left, she forgot her clothes and toiletries because she'd left them sprawled all over my bathroom. About a week later, she and my brother moved into an apartment together. After he paid for the moving truck, deposit, and utilities, she cheated on him with her ex and kicked him out of the apartment. This left him broke, homeless, and heartbroken. In the days after the cleanup, she kept calling and emailing him several times per day, demanding that he ask me to ship her clothes and toiletries back to her. I mean, it's really important. It's my North Face. My brother called and pleaded with me to ship them to her so she'd stop having a reason to contact him. Being the loving sister that I am, I gathered up the really important North Face sweatshirt, shorts, underwear, shampoo, conditioner, soap, and razor. I folded everything nicely. I then wrote a nice note apologizing for taking so long to mail them out to her, and let her know that I hope all is well. The note was written in permanent marker, and the paper happened to be resting on the really important North Face when I wrote it. Unfortunately, in a turn of events that nobody could have predicted, the ink bled straight through the paper and onto the shirt. Also unfortunately, the shampoo, soap, and conditioner caps were not tightly secured on their bottles, and the contents leaked out all over the clothes, further spreading the ink. The most unfortunate result, though, was that her razor didn't have any sort of protective cap or container, and left little slashes all over the really important North Face. She received the package, and my brother never heard from her again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My wife used to keep all of these little Godiva chocolates that she likes in her desk at work, but then she started noticing several of them going missing and figured it must be from someone from the overnight cleaning staff taking them. Fed up with losing her not inexpensive treats, she decided to get revenge on the choco thief in question by replacing the good chocolate with little squares of chocolate laxatives that looked just like real candies. The next morning, she saw several of the laxatives gone, and from that day forward, she was never missing another one of her good chocolates ever again. Sounds a lot like a similar story I heard last week. A guy was tired of his roommate drinking his milk, so he put laxatives in the milk, and the roommate had to go to hospital because he got so dehydrated. He just told the guy he must be allergic to milk. When I was a kid, I attempted to call my aunt. For whatever reason, I accidentally dialed a 6 instead of a 3, and this man cursed me out for being a telemarketer. I was so stunned I didn't even hang up initially. My petty revenge was giving the number to all of my friends, and for about 2 weeks we called him every day at all hours. I used to work shifts many years ago, including regular night shifts. My boss was an unpleasant person to say the least. He'd leave his keys on top of his locker. So one night I took a small file to work and filed down 1 or 2 teeth from his front door key. The next day, he was telling everyone how he got home and his door lock was broken and he had to get a locksmith out, which cost a fortune, and he didn't get much sleep. Wouldn't you know it, it happened again a couple of months later. Then his car key got the same treatment. I stopped after that as I heard him mention it was getting suspicious that all these locks stopped working. But unknown to me, other colleagues also disliked him. One night, his locker disappeared entirely. Rumor has it that it's part of the foundations of an office block in London now. The boss paged me on my wedding night. Yeah, it's on me for leaving the pager on, but in my defense, it automatically turned on after charging, and I wanted to have a full battery before setting off on my honeymoon trip. He did this as a joke, but it came at, shall we say, an inappropriate moment. We had a page only if something's on fire policy, so I had to call in even though I'd just gotten married and was about to go on 2 weeks vacation. When he answered, he laughed so hard that I just had to do something about it. So when I got back, I programmed the mail servers to call out on their phone lines, and I hit his pager with dial-back numbers for those phone service lines where women pretend to be enjoying your company and describe what exactly they'd do to you. These would hit his pager at 4 a.m. every day. His wife got to his pager once before he did one time and saw a text message with something like, "I loved how you describe how you do me, Jerry. Call me back when your wife's gone for the day." The wife, funnily enough, was not amused. She thought he'd been calling naughty phone operators and tore him a new one. He knew it was me, but he was too stubborn to ask me to call it off. So it kept up for weeks until he finally figured out where the script was running from and used it to page me instead. We had a back and forth pager war for a while, but then it all messed up when an actual data center emergency happened and one of us ignored the page, thinking that it was the other person pranking him. So that ended the fun. Well, you may have overblown your revenge just a tad by constantly raising suspicion of him cheating on his partner, but it has to be said that the both of you seem okay with this ongoing prank war and didn't just ask or tell the other one to stop, so fair go, I guess. Probably for the best that it stopped, though. I started in a new job 2 years ago and hated a guy that kept joking about me, so I got his phone number and announced his PS4 for sale for like $50. Same day during lunch, he was already going nuts because of the calls. Of course, he found a way to remove it, but it was nice to watch. When I was in 7th grade, the startup my dad was part of was failing miserably, in no small part due to a crazy CEO. While at his house, my dad observed the CEO's toddler daughter picking up a piece of dog crap and licking it. He picked her up and told her to give Dad a kiss. A horrible former coworker always claimed that she worked more hours than she actually did, and when she was at work, she just browsed Facebook all day. The doctor/owner was a very hands-off guy and just let her do whatever she wanted, despite me going to him with proof. So I decided to take revenge. She wasn't computer savvy at all, so I removed Internet Explorer from her desktop and installed an identical icon that, when clicked, would instantly restart the computer. It was so satisfying when she'd just forget and click it, losing anything that she was working on. She'd always grumble and complain about the virus on her computer. I started a new job about 3 weeks later, and when I left, it was still giving her problems. My mum and dad. This happened when I was in my late 20s. My mum and I were in the car, my dad called and they started bickering with each other. My mum got irritated and hung up on him. He called her right back, and when she answered, he hung up on her. Didn't even say a word, just waited for her to say hello and then hung up. It was so petty and hilarious to see my parents acting like children. I couldn't stop laughing. They've been married for over 35 years. I still get tickled when I think about it. I lived in a cheap, crappy apartment with roommates and we all worked in fast food. Money was tight. One roommate ended up unemployed for a few weeks and then got a job as a bank teller, making much better money. However, while unemployed, she had missed a rent payment which she had scraped together to cover for her. 2 weeks into the new job, she gets her first paycheck. Obviously, we're expecting immediate payback. Day 1, she said something along the lines of she couldn't do the personal business of cashing her check during work, so she could pay us in a couple of days. The Friday she was supposed to pay us, she comes home with a big shopping bag and casually mentions she can't pay back rent yet because she had to buy new work clothes. When the roommates and I got upset, she went total B-word on us that we didn't understand how to work a professional job because we were only food service, and basically told us we'd get our money when she felt like it. That weekend, she misplaced her name tag required at work. She spent hours searching for it. At some point, I came across the name tag in a random spot and I said nothing. She kept searching for it all weekend and was panicked that she'd look bad to her new boss. I never moved or took the name tag, but the whole time I knew where it was. She never found it and had to get a new one. She also never paid back the rent, and we kicked her out a few weeks later. In grade school, I kept a bag of chips in the same pocket every day of my backpack. This kid I knew would punch that pocket any chance he'd get for 5 days in a row. One day, I replaced the chips with a bag of sewing pins, and he never did it again. Sweet, sweet justice. I worked at a 50k tech company. I worked with a PM, Maggie, who misread my email and got her dates messed up. She scheduled a meeting for Thursday instead of Friday. When I told her she'd scheduled the wrong day, she got mad at me and emailed all of my managers up to my vice president, that's 4 levels of management, to say how much of a troublemaker I was. It was her own fault for not being able to read. 2 years later, I have to work with her again, and I pretend like I'm all happy and friends with her. 2 years after that, I quit and move on to a better company. I get an email saying that Maggie's applying to my new company and said I could provide a positive reference for her. I email the recruiter and blast all of my 6 years of crap on her, and I block her from getting hired. Take that, Maggie, you B-word. I never forget. During my freshman year of high school, I was in a biology class that was made up of mainly juniors. This one guy who sat next to me would always be a jerk to me during class. I always did well on the tests, so he'd look over and copy the answers from my Scantron. I'm pretty sure that he didn't realize that I knew he was cheating off me. Well, one day I got fed up with this guy messing with me and cheating off me, so the next test comes around and sure enough he starts copying my answers. I finish the test and so does he. He gets up and turns his test in and comes back to his seat. I looked him in the eyes and proceeded to erase my entire Scantron. I then retook the test, this time marking the correct answers. The look of panic in his eyes was so satisfying. He ended up making a 2% on that test and never cheated off me again. I was going to say how's that possible to guess on a Scantron and only get 2%, but then I realized you purposefully chose the wrong answers at a 98% accuracy. Damn, that's brutal. This was my best revenge. I went through an awful divorce. My ex-wife cheated on me, told lies about me, and all throughout the divorce I took the high road and I was there for my kids, while she disappeared off the face of the earth. Her birthday was only a couple of weeks after the divorce was final. As the kids were young, I was a good guy and purchased several presents from the kids to her. Among the gifts I bought was a necklace with a big red A at the end. Her first name is Anne. I had the kids give that to her and she wore her Scarlet letter all around the town. Most people in our town knew what she had done, and some were even aware of the necklace. Yep, I made my adulterous ex-wife wear the scarlet letter.
What's the most significant "you just messed with the wrong person" moment you've witnessed or experienced? I stopped in Reno overnight while moving across the country. Had everything I own in a little beater I bought for the trip. All night, I'm keeping an eye on the parking lot. There's a cop car in the lot. Sure enough, late that night, I see a shady guy walking slowly along the line of parked cars, scoping them out. To my surprise, he decides the cop car is the one he wants to break into. So he takes off his shirt, wraps it around his arm, and starts hitting the window with his forearm. I call the front desk and let them know what's going on. The lady says she's calling the cops. I tell her it's a cop car he's trying to break into, and ask if there's a cop staying in the hotel. She says that she'll check. About 30 seconds later, a very angry man in his boxers thunders out of his room and tackles the dude. He messed with the wrong person. Why of all the cars would he decide that the cop car was the one to break into? That just sounds like a bad plan from the start. My father recently told me a story about this jerk who he works with driving trucks for different distributors. They have no smoking areas because of food productions and things like that, but this jerk decided to smoke there anyway, putting his butts out in a styrofoam cup. Anyway, after a while, his truck was loaded, and he decided to just throw the cup out the window after getting his truck, when a man walked past and asked him calmly to pick up the cup and put it in the bin. To which this intellectual giant of a driver says, "If it's so important, why don't you put it in the bin?" before driving off. Without making much of a reaction, he picked it up, walked to the bin, then makes his way back inside. When my father gets back to the main truck depot, he sees this driver getting yelled at by his boss. Turns out there was a conference being held with some overseas members of the company and the CEO. The CEO whom was told to pick up the cup. They instantly barred the driver from the site and all associated sites, and my father's boss had to jump through hoops to not lose the contract renewal. I can't imagine the level of ecstasy that CEO would have felt during the whole situation, knowing that this prick doesn't know who he is. When I was a senior in high school, I was at some house party. There was this chick named Rachel there, a notoriously crazy girl who was known for causing trouble anywhere she went. She was also a pretty big girl, maybe 5'9" with broad shoulders. Anyway, out of nowhere, she just starts screaming at another girl, Sarah, a shorter, skinny thing, who was honestly on the other side of the room doing absolutely nothing. Rachel gets up in her face, starts cussing her out, and pushing her multiple times, obviously just trying to start something for the heck of it. Rachel finally decides to throw a punch, and I kid you not, like a flash of lightning, Sarah just launches at Rachel, starts beating the crap out of her face, knocks her on her butt, and strongholds Rachel's hair and starts slamming her skull on the brick fireplace in the house. I think she must have knocked Rachel out for a minute, because Sarah decided she was done and just stood up and walked away. Turns out Sarah's older sister was a competitive female boxer and showed her a thing or two about fighting. Lesson learned: just because they're small doesn't mean they can't beat the crap out of you. There's this old, miserable looking man with a nickel who seems to just ride the subway all day. The nickel man only seems to have one purpose in his life. He sticks out his hand with a nickel on his palm and he just points it at you. It's like he's asking for you to look at his plain old nickel. He's like a reverse panhandler. One night, I was coming home drunk and saw the nickel guy. He was doing his usual rounds and he came to me. He stuck out his hand and like usual, you just let him be. But I was tipsy and I pulled the nickel out of his hand. Within seconds, he went from normal nickel guy to crazy rip your face off yelling angry gorilla man. Once I put it back, he became normal nickel guy again. I was mortified. The nickel's obviously very important to him. He just wants to show it off. One night during my junior year of high school, some of my buddies came by and asked if I wanted to go party with them. I didn't know the person throwing the party, but I said screw it and went with them anyway. It turned out to be one of the most surreal nights of my life. We got there and only knew a handful of people out of the 50 or so people that were there. There were a lot of people from different schools, so I knew that eventually something was going to happen. Soon after, one kid, we'll call him Ron, pulls out a piece and starts bragging about how his parents bought it for him and no one should mess with him. Then he starts pointing it at people to show off the laser sight on it. The guy throwing the party, we'll call him John, saw this and told him to stop pointing it at people. Ron said something like, "Screw off, don't tell me what to do, I do what I want." It got a little heated, but then it all seemed to get worked out and Ron put it away. About 5 minutes later, Ron had the piece out again, and trying to be slick and prove he was a bad boy, pointed it right at John's back. When he did, John just happened to turn and saw Ron pointing it at him. I don't remember his exact words, but John said something to the effect of, "Oh, you want to mess with me? I'll be right back." He started jogging to the house. We were in the front yard. And I told my friends, we need to leave. This is about to get crazy. While John was jogging to the house and while he was inside, Ron seemed confident at first. But then he realized he'd gotten himself in a terrible situation and started to walk quickly to his car. John was not far behind, however, with a much bigger piece of his own. Ron got to his car and got in, but he was blocked in and couldn't move. John walked up to the car and tapped on the window. Ron cracked the window about an inch and was crying, probably begging for his life. All while John calmly talked to him. I couldn't hear what was said, but I did hear John finally say, "Stop crying, you look like a real wuss." He started to walk away, but then all of a sudden he stopped, turned around, and fired at Ron's face from about 8 to 10 feet away. We all thought for sure that we had just witnessed a murder, and scattered like roaches when you turned the lights on. I remember looking back and seeing John calmly walking back into the house while everyone was running around him. That was what freaked me out the most. His calmness. Turns out Ron lived, and John was charged with attempted murder and a few other things. Ron had reconstructive surgery to repair some of the damage, but he was badly disfigured. I don't remember if John was found guilty or not, but I do remember hearing that Ron won a settlement from John's family. He bought a new Cadillac and whatever else he wanted, but he was super depressed about his disfigured face and got hammered constantly. He died in a single car drunk driving accident not too long after. I'll never forget that night. That got insanely out of control. Those are not toys. You don't just wave them around. And you definitely don't use them unless it is absolutely necessary. I live in front of a hospital parking lot. Some guy in an expensive car cut in line. A lady in a van was super peeved and kept honking. He got out to calm her down. She got out, ripped off her wig, and started screaming and pointing at the cancer center entrance. He looked like he wet himself and got back in his car. Still stayed where he cut in line though. My father and his brother, who were both 6'6", were riding in my uncle's tiny little Chevette, and a guy got road rage and chased them into a parking lot. You could almost see the guy fill his pants when they unfolded themselves out of the car. My dad always tells me this story of how you should never get out of your car after a road rage incident. My mom and him were driving to the city when another driver didn't give my dad the right of way. He almost crashed into my parents, and my mom was pregnant at the time. So of course my dad was angry out of his mind. My dad, being a pretty big dude, wasn't exactly someone to mess with, but out of the little car that almost crashed into my parents, got a man that my dad described as a freaking giant. Dad quickly got back in the car and kept driving. He always gets embarrassed when he tells the story, because my mom still laughs at the face he made when that giant got out of his tiny car. Two drunk guys were bugging this local busker, trying to get him to fight them, saying all sorts of racist stuff. The busker was black. The busker just lost it. Obviously, he had to deal with a ton of drunk jerks. He picked up his guitar and hit one of the drunk guys across the face with it. I called the police when I saw it, and later got called in to give evidence against the drunk guys, who got arrested, saying that they started it. I mean, hey, you got what you asked for. I was covering a hockey game as a sports reporter when I saw the single best retaliation of my life. In my state, if you're female and you want to play hockey with the boys, you can. Typically, the serious girl hockey players will play in these leagues because the girls-only hockey leagues are kinda crap. There was this girl named Alex who I covered since she was a freshman. and she was really good. She'd played since she was a kid, was on some really good travel teams, competed in national camps, got a college scholarship for the sport, and played 4 years in college. Anyway, during her junior year, I'm covering an away game at this crappy arena, and her school is playing one of its rivals, so I know it's going to be a chippy game. It did not disappoint. This big tough boy notices she's a girl, or had played against her before, and spends the first 2 periods basically trying to intimidate her by checking her hard into the boards whenever she has the puck, and generally doing all the things you know someone is doing to antagonize you. Now, I've seen this girl play, and I know she isn't going to tolerate that, so I just sit and wait for the moment that she snaps. It comes in the 3rd period. The jerk comes running full speed from one side of the ice to the other and gives her one of the worst cheap shot checks I've ever seen. She hits the boards hard, lands on the ice, and the crowd yells because the refs either didn't see it or didn't care, and the play breaks the other way, so everyone else is moving away from them. She doesn't miss a beat though. Calmly, I watch her pick herself up, and the jerk hockey player must have said something to her to cause her to snap, because she takes her helmet off and goes his way. At this point, I can tell he thinks he's going to dismiss this sweet little girl and tell her to play with dolls or something, but he never gets the chance. She socks him right in the jaw and starts beating the crap out of him. It was absolutely amazing. He must have had maybe 50 pounds on her, but she didn't care and beat his butt handily. And because the refs were on the other side of the ice, it took a little bit of time to break them up. She got ejected, he got ejected, but he sulked out of the arena knowing full well he got his butt kicked by a girl. It was phenomenal. 2 kids about 11 years old were bullying this 9-year-old kid by instigating their little sister to go hit and kick him, with the threat that they would beat him up with a hockey stick if he retaliated. The poor 9-year-old pleaded with them to stop, but when they wouldn't, he charged the kid with the hockey stick, took it from him, chased them off, and threw the stick over the fence, then continued to saunter home. I witnessed this from about 50 feet away at age 13. It took place in about a minute, and while I was contemplating a way to help the kid out, he just took matters into his own hands like a G. That kid was not one to mess with. When I was about 10 or so, there was a cricket in my house that I shot with a Nerf gun from a prone position. It dodged it, then jumped at me, and I got up in a panic so fast, the gun flung from my hand into the kitchen, breaking a few glasses. I never messed with crickets again. Didn't you know? Crickets are vicious, dude. I was working in a sketchy part of Albuquerque when I realized a guy was following me through the parking lot. I started walking faster, and so did he. I knew I wasn't going to get to my car before he reached me, so I took a knife out of my purse and turned around and shoved it in his face and yelled, "I'm from Wisconsin, I can gut a deer!" The dude took off, and I got in my car shaking. That's a really scary moment. I'm glad you were able to defend yourself and got away safely. I lost it at a Subway a while back. This story isn't about me losing it at a person myself, but I found someone who could and did. The Subway I go to is inside a skating rink, and on this day, it was flooded with newly pubescent boys thinking that treating people like absolute crap is how you act like a macho man. One girl behind the counter was near tears, and the other woman was trying to hold her own ground against a bunch of around 13-year-olds. It was stuff like, "You witch, I didn't ask for mayo. Are you blind? For crap's sake, that's not toasted enough. When I get a job, I'm going to be making more than you." Just a taste of some of what I heard. So I went out to the lobby of the skating rink and found a woman nearby and asked her if she was with the boys in Subway, which she was, and then I told her to follow me. The look on the boys' faces when she let out her angered screech after listening to them was friggin' priceless. She made the boys pay for their own food. One boy didn't even get to finish making his sandwich, with the woman saying, "Wrap it up how it is and he'll pay for it." And from what I gathered as she practically dragged them out of there was the boys who weren't hers, she was going to speak to their parents, followed by strong protests as she told them to pack their crap, as she was taking them home early. I left the girls at Subway a nice tip and they gave me a cookie. Never mess with an angry mom. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at that moment. That's gotta be the worst kind of jerk there is. The group of 13-year-olds who think they've just got the world figured out and that they're better than you even though they have not accomplished anything. Their kryptonite is their mother, and I love watching that moment. When I played hockey, I got kicked out of a game early, so I had to watch it from the stands. A guy from the other team was chasing one of my teammates around the ice, slashing him, trying to get him to fight. Finally, my buddy dropped his gloves and proceeded to give this dude a man-sized butt whooping. That teammate went on to become an enforcer in the NHL. We're getting a lot of hockey stories today, but I guess that is the one sport where you're technically allowed to fight the other team. After drinking and partying in the haunch outside our base in Japan, my friend and I went to the on-base taxi stand to go back to the barracks. We hail and start climbing into the first open cab we see. This drunken white guy was running for it, but we beat him to it, and we didn't even see him. Anyway, he's furious and starts yelling at us. 2 girls, 1 Latina, the other black. "You stupid friggin' N-word!" And then a group of about 6 black sailors come around the corner to the stand. I don't know how it happened. Maybe Paul Mooney summoned them. Anyway, white guy changed his mind and ends up walking/running to the ships. A fight didn't end up breaking out, but he came really close to getting his butt whooped. I work at a restaurant and 4 punks decided to dine and ditch. They ran out and got away, but luckily I overheard one of their names while they were eating. Long story short, I tracked him down on Twitter, and the direct messages went like this. Me. Haha, nice try. We know who you are. You owe us $40. Bring the money or we're reporting you to the police and your school. You have until Sunday night. 1 minute later. I'm terribly sorry for this horrible incident. I'm bringing the money right now. I'm terribly sorry. It wasn't even my idea. I had no choice but to run also, or else I'm in trouble. We left the bag of money. 15 minutes later after I sent the message, a guy literally opened the front door and threw a Ziploc bag full of $40 of cash and change into the restaurant and ran away. Tools. I bet they thought it was real friggin' funny at the time, too. I work in a law office and regularly have to file documents with the court. I've learned from watching one interaction not to mess with the clerks at the filing window. A lot of people probably don't know or wouldn't believe how detailed the rules are for submitting documents to the court. There are rules regarding the type of paper you can use, the exact spacing of the heading on the paper, the exact measurements of the 2-hole punches at the top of the sheet, all kinds of things. There are literally dozens of rules on how to format your filings. In my experience, these rules are rarely enforced. The clerks will reject documents if there are major errors, missing signatures, or filled out incorrectly, things like that. But will usually let things slide like your 2-hole punches not being precisely 2 3/4 inches apart. But there was one day where I saw a clerk take sweet revenge against someone who had it coming. I was standing in line waiting to file something, and a notoriously huge jerk of an attorney got called up to the window. The clerk asked him something like, "I'm really sorry, Mr. Jerk, but you're missing some attachments to this form." He reacts as if she had just stood from her chair, flipped him the bird, and went and pooped on his mom's grave. He starts yelling about how she didn't know what the heck she was doing, and that a trained monkey could do her job, that he would complain to her supervisor, and on and on and on. He goes stomping away, and she looks much calmer than you would expect for someone who just got reamed out by this enormous jerk. I get called up to her window and say something like, "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." She replies, "It's fine, he's on my list now." I'm curious, so I ask what she means. Her response was fantastic. She says, "Mr. Jerk handles a lot of family law cases. He'll be wanting to file things here, and his paperwork is bound to land on my desk. For people like him, I get out the formatting sections of the rules of court, and I make sure he's followed every one of them." She points to my filing and says, "Your 2-hole punches look off. You see how one is higher than the other? There's supposed to be a certain distance from the top of the page. I'm not going to reject yours, but next time he drops something off at the filing box, you better believe I'm gonna bust out my ruler. I let her know that I think that's awesome. But once he's seen the reason his document was rejected, he'll just have an assistant fix it or whatever. She replies, "We don't have to tell him why it was rejected specifically, just that it violated some rule of formatting. He can figure that out for himself, if he ever wants to have another document filed." She looked so happy. This woman has got to be one of the most petty, evil, conniving people I've ever heard of. I want to travel the world with her.
Where do you draw the line with charity? I was in Chicago a few years ago with my husband, my daughter, and her fiancé. We went to Giordano's for pizza. Anyway, we ordered way too much food, and the pizza, when it arrived, was like 2 inches thick. We'd had so many starters that we could only eat one piece each of the 2 pizzas, so we got to-go boxes. As we were walking along, this woman came up and told us she was really hungry and could we help her out giving her some money. Well, we didn't have any cash on us, but we did have this still warm pizza. We offered her one of the to-go boxes, but she got all insulted and told us she didn't want our goddamn pizza. She wanted money. We told her to F off and went and found a homeless guy who was more than happy to take our pizza and thanked us profusely while enjoying a slice. Yeah, I've met homeless people who get all indignant because I offered them something besides money. I've met homeless people who I have given money and they have the audacity then to turn around and say, "Give me more." I'm also surprised this person is all like, "And the pizza was 2 inches thick." And it's like, yeah, isn't that the whole thing with Chicago pizza? It's thick. I was in a bicycle shop getting a repair done and some lady in her 20s came up to me and asked me to buy her a bike. I am not very prosperous looking, so I cannot imagine what she was thinking. She was early 20s with a European accent. I thought she might be Dutch or Danish, but I'm not knowledgeable about those things. She looked more like a traveler than a tourist, and she just made a little small talk about the bikes and how expensive they were, and then quite seriously asked me to buy her one. She seemed used to the idea that others would take care of her. I can be very dense about it when a girl is flirting with me, but I don't think that is what was up. After she wandered off, one of the guys asked if she was bothering me and I said no, so I imagine she was creating other issues. Bloody hell, the cheek on that one! I was at work a while back at a major retailer in the Deep South. I had a gentleman come in and ask me about a laptop. The laptop cost $899. I explained the specs, gave him a lowdown on the warranty, etc. He let me wrap up my spiel and looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'll give you $400 for it." This happens a lot, so I patiently informed him that this was impossible for me to do and I do not designate prices. He looked at me and said, "Well, you just lost yourself a computer sale," and left. I wish it ended there. I got off and was walking to my car, and as I got there, a truck comes flying into the parking lot, and it's the same gentleman as before. He whips into the parking spot next to mine and gets out. My metaphorical hackles were raised because this guy was driving so aggressively. He gets out and slams his door and walks over to me. He looks at me and says, "You'll sell that laptop to me for $300 or I'm going to get you fired for racism." I answered him and just said, "Sir, I have no idea what you are and I have no intention of selling you anything at all. I'm not even on the clock. If you have an issue, go into the store and ask for a manager." He swore explosively that his intimidation factor didn't work and went into the store. I drove home and forgot about it. I get to work the next day and find out he was arrested for trying to steal the shelf display. Feels good, man. I never want to work in retail and have to deal with some goddamn psychopath trying to get me to bring down prices that I have no right to. I found a wallet with $200 and several gift cards in it while I was at work one day. It was a Yu-Gi-Oh wallet, so I figured some kid lost his B-Day money. I turned it into the service desk and forgot about it. 30 days later, no one had claimed it, so I got to keep it. I was telling my friend about my good luck, and a friend of hers, not a friend of mine, says, "You should give me $20. I asked her why. "'Cause I never punched you in the face for all those times you were a female dog to me. It should be noted that I have always been kind to this extremely unpleasant girl, even when she was squatting in my living room for several weeks. Well, goddamn, I guess it's just an unpleasant fact that some hoes be like that. Life moves on. Congratulations on your brand new Yu-Gi-Oh wallet, son. I gave this guy a free hot dog and he took it and threw it on the ground and said he wouldn't be a part of my system. He told me that he didn't need my charity because he was an adult. The man made his choice. He refuted the hot dog of charity and now he will suffer for it with an empty tummy. I've helped out a mother trying to buy a pizza dinner for her 3 kids. They looked really hungry and the mom was short maybe $10. She was frantically looking around in her purse purse and pockets trying to come up with the cash. I gave her a 20 and told her to buy some breadsticks and sodas too. Her look of gratitude is something I'll never forget. On the other hand, I was once in some clothing store with my girlfriend, I don't remember which one, they all kind of blend together in my mind, when a teenage girl walked up to me and demanded $10 so she could buy some lipstick. I refused, so she ran to her mother, who basically chewed me out for refusing her precious baby. So basically, I won't give any charity to entitled buttholes. First of all, yes, my friend, that is the way to go. And second of all, who the hell are these entitled people who just walk up, demand money, and then their parents are just as entitled and expect you to buy things for their child? If someone genuinely needs help, I'm willing to give it. If they think I should be obligated to give them my time and money because of arbitrary reason I don't necessarily agree with, they can go suck a bag of ducks. They didn't actually say ducks. I remember about 10 years ago I had just moved to a new city for college and I was definitely a starving student. I had a budget of $40 a week for food and transportation and that was it. Anyway, one evening I'm walking from class to the bus stop and I see a kid sitting in an alcove begging passers-by for money. A few things. He had a nice bike, new shoes, I had neither, and expensive sunglasses. So he sees me and asks if I can spare some change. Feeling charitable, I reach into my wallet and I see that I have $22. 2 singles and 20. I take out the 2 singles and pass them to him and he says, "Oh, you aren't giving me the 20? At which point I took the 2 singles back, stuck them in my wallet, pocketed it, and walked off while this moochy butthole says something akin to, "Come on, that's not cool. Can I please have the $2? Beggars can't be choosers has never felt more appropriate. See, that's a good example of where, you draw the line. But a lot of the stories I'm seeing here, and probably not reading because, the topic at hand in the video title and stuff, it's about where you draw the line, But loads of people here are just trying to virtue signal, it seems. One time there was a kid at McDonald's who was lost and couldn't find his mother at a food court in a mall, so it wasn't like middle of the city. He was really hungry and asked me for some food, so I bought him some of the cheaper items because I'm a pretty poor teenager. After I bought him some food, he started yelling at me because I bought him cheap food. He said his mom would have brought him a Big Mac. At that point, I took his food and brought the child to the mall security and let his mom get him some food after she recovered him. The angel and devil sitting on his shoulder.
Abandon the child, he is a lost cause.
Do not blame the child. It is the parents' fault that they are such a spoiled little B-word. I was checking out of a Walgreens and a man with a lot of what looked like skin cancer approached the register. He asked the manager if he was a veteran. The manager was, so he asked to speak privately with him. I couldn't hear much, but he was asking for money. Manager turns him down as I am walking out of the store. Man tracks me down on my way to the car and gives me a sob story about being a war veteran with skin cancer and he needs money to go to the VA. I asked him for proof that he was a veteran and he didn't have any, of course. So I said I could not help him. After pressing me for money aggressively, he started cursing me and rolled his eyes and walked away. I posted this on Reddit a while ago and an actual veteran advised me that they carry some special form on them at all times. He said it's more important than a birth certificate to them. I can't believe a guy that had the audacity to cuss me out when he's the one impersonating a veteran for money. See, that is the thing. It is why I am frankly so skeptical about helping a lot of people because many people in the world have actually forgone their moral fiber and integrity in turn for making money. And they don't care about you, they don't care about anyone else, they just want money. Just for the skin cancer alone, I probably would have given them change or whatever to take the bus wherever they need to get to. My boyfriend worked at a gas station for a few years. Apparently, nothing hardens your heart to charity cases quite like it. I was with him once when a man was trying to bum money, then offered to sell us clothes from his car, all about the size for tween-age kids, and then started yelling at us. Meanwhile, there are about 15 other people he could have harassed there. If you didn't expect to run out of gas, why do you have clothes to sell that aren't boxed or even look remotely like you run a shop? I have a little bit more respect for someone who's actively trying to offload some bullcrap on me or sell me something in exchange for money. Even if they offer me something that I genuinely have little to no value in whatsoever and don't want, I still respect it a little more than someone just being like, "Hey, you, give me some money." At a gas station off the interstate, this guy came up to me and asked for gas money. I gave him $5. He walked straight over to his late model Cadillac and drove off. Several layers of WTF later, I no longer give strangers money for gas. Okay, here's the thing. If they actually straight up walked off with my $5, $100 and then just drove off, I'd be annoyed. If they filled up their car, that's whatever, because I don't really consider cars to be a status of wealth anymore. Because in some cases, what that should tell you is that this person is kind of stupid and bad with their money because they decided to go with a really nice expensive car that is actually outside of their means. Because here's the thing, once you buy a car, your hand is pretty much on your wallet at all times to make sure that you can keep it maintained. Which is personally why I choose to bicycle everywhere like Kentaro Oe, the golden boy. If you know what I'm talking about, you're a legend. I was eating with my family at an outdoor restaurant in Vancouver. We got the bread, water, and appetizers, and then a homeless guy walked up and without asking took the bread off our table, ate some, and then walked away. Dude, if you had asked, we would have given it to you. Something about the idea of someone stealing my food makes me angrier than stealing my money, and I probably would have kicked off right there and then. I'll pay for a bus fare for someone. A few times people have been short of change, and one time this guy was incredibly hungover, had somehow got to Swindon from London, and his friends had buggered off. I figured a bus fare was a bit of kindness to someone feeling rough, and he was so thankful to get to a town and to some tourist information and a cash point. However, if you're homeless and you sit next to an ATM and stare at me like I'm the devil, you get nothing. Whilst I might have more money than you at the moment, I am in fact a student and I do need that £5 for food, okay? I think that's absolutely fair. Just because you have less than me doesn't mean you're entitled to my things or my money or whatever, and it doesn't mean that I'm obligated to give you anything. Charity's only charity after all if you do it of your own volition. On Oxford Street in London, there's this one homeless dude who sits next to the ATM. He always asks me for change. I don't get it. I obviously don't have change. That's why I'm at the ATM. What does he think I'm going to give him? A 20? I wouldn't mind if he didn't kiss his teeth and spit whenever I politely apologize. Passive-aggressive stuff like that just gets under my goddamn skin. Where does charity end and entitlement begin? When we start, continue to enable these people by not helping them out of their own situation. Simply giving someone money does not solve the problem. It merely delays it. Give a man a fish and he will eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he will eat for life. This is a very good proverb which should be thought of when restructuring our forever flawed welfare system. Simply throwing money at people and keeping them content does nothing for our society in the long run. Sure, you can feel good about yourself because you advocated for this, but ultimately, you're only making it worse. We need to implement employment programs, skills and training, education, goals that need to be met in order to continue to receive government assistance. If you're going to get this check, you need to maintain a score of X on these following things. We will help you along the way, but in the meantime, there needs to be a give and take. If you don't have a job, you can still work for money you are getting. This raises self-esteem, makes the person feel better about themselves, etc. There is no initiative with our current system. It is broken. I'm going to be serious about this a minute because this is a pretty divisive topic when you get down to it on a national level like this, talking about the welfare state, which I'm just going to make it very clear. I highly value the welfare state, but I also believe in equivalent exchange and that you should work for what you get. I used to love shopping at 3 or 4 a.m. when I lived in Austin. My favorite store was the Heb at Brody and WM. Cannon. It was huge and empty except for the stalkers and a cashier. Loved it. And then I actually had someone try to scam me. Had he asked for a little cash, that would have been one thing. But when he acted like he knew me from a mutual job, I got the creeps. I verified for myself that I had no freaking idea who this guy was by naming off a place I'd never worked from a time when I lived in Houston, and he ate it up, acting excited at our reunion, then giving me a sob story about his kids being unemployed and that they had no money for food. So I said I didn't have cash. He said that was fine, that I could just buy groceries with my card. I decided to give him a semi-true sob story of my own about how sick my retired cop husband had been and that I barely had enough for our groceries and had to borrow from my parents to buy his prescription. I think I managed a tear or two. I said it was just great to see him. We exchanged goodbyes and I made a beeline for the checkout and made them rouse the manager from the office. It thrilled me to no end to discover that they knew about this man and his scam. He'd been told he wasn't allowed in the store, but they just didn't have the manpower to watch the entrance every night. I went on with my shopping, bought my stuff, made them get the manager again and made him walk me to my car. And that was the end of my love affair with 3 a.m. grocery shopping. I too once loved going to a shop real early in the morning, but sadly that place was so wrought with crime at that time that they decided to shut at regular times. This will probably get buried, but here it is. As a rule, me, my husband, his brother, we all give money to people on the streets. My husband and I never have lots of money, but it is what it is. My brother-in-law, on the other hand, is truly truly awful with money and hates having it, so he generally will give $10 or a $20 bill to whoever asks for it at the right time. Well, fast forward a week after he gave some homeless dude about $5 to $10 on his way home from work, he and my husband are walking around downtown, and this homeless guy starts to call out to him. He kinda just waves him off because he's in a bad mood and has no money, and just doesn't want to be bothered. The homeless dude comes running up to him yelling, "Hey man, wait!" So he finally just stops and goes, "What?" And the homeless guy goes, "Here man, you helped me out last week and I just wanted to say thank you. I didn't forget you," and proceeds to hand my brother-in-law $10. At this point, he and my husband are both just like, WTF, and my brother-in-law goes to give it back to the guy saying, "Nah man, you'll need it again, don't worry about me," and the homeless guy was absolutely adamant that he'd take the money. So rad and so bizarre. Finally, a story that meets the criteria of the topic at hand while also showing the what goes around comes around benefit to karma and charity. I've said it before, but some of these are just people virtue signaling and not actually saying anything about the topic. Coincidentally, my dad just told me this story. He was grabbing a quick lunch at McDonald's and some guy asked him for cash to buy food. Dad only had his card on him, so he bought this dude a huge meal instead. A few weeks later, the same guy hits him up for cash at the gas station. My dad doesn't have anything, and he says no with an apology, but the dude freaks out and starts screaming, "You Mexicans are so cheap! Screw you! Go back to your country!" etc. My dad calmly replies, "I remember you. I bought you a meal a few weeks ago, and because of your attitude, I will never, ever help you again, you ungrateful female dog." I mean, yeah, no matter who you are, if someone's immediate response is to be racist to you after you've just said, "No, I will not give you my hard-earned money," then yeah, you can say whatever the hell you want to them as far as I'm concerned. With charity, it depends mostly on who asks and why. I'm a fairly nice guy. I like helping out and such. On Sunday, a coworker told me his sister had cancer and was collecting donations. I gave him a $20 bill to help out. Downtown, you can tell who's just in it for the money. They get like $2 tops. I'll admit, when I went to LA recently, I didn't see a single homeless person that I wasn't like, "Oh, damn, you need this more than me." Except for maybe the one really talkative guy who was all like, "Hey, you know, the royal family are evil, right? I'm telling you this because you're English, you know." I was once visiting a girl I used to date at a local Walmart when I noticed that this middle-aged pregnant woman was struggling with her groceries. Like a gentleman, I offered to carry them to her car for her, which she agreed. When we reached her car, she asked for my number. As it turned out, we went to the neighboring universities. Now, here's where things get a little shady. I get a call from an unknown number nearly 4 months later. Turns out it was the same lady asking if I could lend her Microsoft Word and a bunch of other software. I told her I couldn't because I didn't have it myself and recommended some free alternatives. I thought this was the last I would hear from her until a month later, I get yet again another call. It was her again. This time she informed me her baby was just born. I congratulated her. She then proceeded to ask me to do her graphic design homework for her. I politely declined and blocked her number. Some people like to leech off of kindness, know where to draw the line. I respect the fact that this lady's going to university while being pregnant and then obviously having to look after their baby, but it's not this person's problem to do your homework for you, especially when they're doing their own course and homework that they need to get done too. I once got yelled at for not giving a homeless woman money. She was spitting, she was angry, I was leaving the bank, so it's not out of line that she thought I would have money, but when she asked if I could spare some change and I said, "Sorry, I don't have any to spare," she freaked. I stopped, looked at her and said, "I have 15 grand in student loans, a mortgage and a dog. I don't have money to spare for someone who can't help themselves." She sat there slack-jawed and shuffled off, and I walked away feeling like a butt. You're not a bad person if you're simply trying to look after yourself and live within your means, okay? Plus, this lady sounds like she specifically placed herself in that area to ask people for money so that it'd be awkward when they maybe said no. So I was a student in the north of England and pretty poor. It's winter and I've just walked my friend to the city train station at the end of a visit. This guy approaches me with a story about how he's lost his bank card, his parents were supposed to pick him up, but their car has broken down and he's totally stranded in the city. He sells it to me. He really sells it to me, which is just as well because he needs like £40 to take the train. He even offers to leave me his laptop as collateral until he can pay me back. Now, I don't want this guy's laptop, but I don't want to lose a week's worth of food/expenses. So I come up with what seems to me a reasonable suggestion. I offer to give him the money if he'll let me hold the laptop battery. It was a big clip on a fare, probably worth about £40 to £50 for a replacement, so it seemed a reasonable compromise. He flipped and told me to go F myself, and that's more or less what I did. I'm going to remember that potentially for the future, because I'm guessing the laptop itself is probably got nothing on it. It's a shell, a hollow decoy, and the battery, he's just going to take that home and then put it into the actual laptop he likes to use. A bum I always see around my city came up and asked me for some cash for the bus. I've often seen her around and she always asks, and I usually give her my change or $1 or $2. I tell her I only have a few bucks but would give her some. She asks to see the money and I take out all I had, which was about $3 in change. She leans in and looks it over and asks, "Is that all?" I say it is, then she tells me she needs more. $2 can get you a bus ride anywhere here. I tell her again it's all I have. She gives me a dirty look, says she doesn't need my money, and goes off to ask the next person for cash. I use the term bum because, as it was explained to me, there seems to be some sort of hierarchy for the homeless. Hobos are like migrant workers, think Steinbeck. Tramps are transients who keep to themselves and fend for themselves. Bums are the douches who just want money and are usually butts. Don't need to be homeless or poor to be a bum. I guess the last part kinda holds true. You don't really need to be homeless or anything to be a bum. Here in England, it's a pretty normal thing to say to someone. It's like, "Oh, you're bumming off your mother. Oh, you're bumming off the government, you scav." I do find the whole talk about the hierarchy kind of funny. I'm just imagining at the very top, tippy top, there's a king hobo on Trash Mountain.
What's the quickest you've noped out of a job? It was a shop that refurbished train suspension hydraulics. 40% of the guys were missing at least part of a finger. Maintenance guy was missing 4 on one hand and 1.5 on the other. Half the guys were intoxicated, and the guy training me stormed out halfway through the second day. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna dip now. I'm sure your fingers really appreciate that decision. Many years ago, I worked at a popular sports bar as a line cook. First day, they had me train with a guy who didn't speak English for 2 hours. Not a huge deal. Mostly you observe people in a kitchen and that's how you learn. The owner came back and said she was scheduling me to be alone the next day, which was Super Bowl Sunday. I noped out of there so fast. I left right then and there. I'm willing to bet the person who left that position before you left for the exact same reason. I worked for a newspaper for most of a week. I was expected to use my own laptop and software. No IT, and I'd have to share logins and passwords with 3 other people and guess when they would need them. For me, it was 1 week. It was 1985 and a collections agency was looking for an IT guy. It was basically desktop support on some IBM PCs. It took me a week to realize what a soul-deadening place that was, and I bolted. It was mutual, actually. They saw how I was reacting to some of the techniques the collectors used. The targets were mostly old people who were encouraged to sell family heirlooms and the like to pay off debts. 3 days after my 2-week training, I was supposed to be a seasonal temp worker for a national propane company. The job distribution and training consisted of taking calls off hours for people who wanted refills and acting as a messenger service, referring their contact info to their local store when they opened the next day. Easy peasy. When I got out onto the floor, I found out I was actually expected to be a dispatcher for drivers, and also the first point of contact for all emergency situations. Things I had never been so much as briefed on in training. My first shift, I had to field a call from a local police officer who was on site to a horrific propane truck crash. I got to wake the guy's district manager in the dead of night, tell him his worker was deceased, and the overturned truck was blocking a few lines of the freeway, and the police were trying to get a hold of him. That was just the start. One customer got the smell of garlic and eggs in their house, and I got the call. "What do I do, Mr. Dispatcher?" How would I know? Get out of the house ASAP? Another customer, the CO detector is going off. I got the call. Instead of 911 for some reason. I had zero interest in being an underpaid, not trained emergency dispatcher. It's the only job I took off on without giving a 2-week notice. I was nice enough to finish out my shift on the 3rd day, but that was it. Honestly, you were way too lenient on these guys. That's a serious position to be just dropping you in without the appropriate training. I would have gone a step further and reported them to the proper authorities. Someone needs to be properly trained in that position. You're handling emergencies. You can't afford to just be any old Joe. I went into an office for an interview. They said they had several positions available and I wanted to do some admin stuff. Well, after the interview, they told me to get into a van to do the next part of the process. Turns out we were driving an hour away so I could shadow one of their door-to-door salespeople. They would ask residents to go into their basement to check their hot water heaters to see if they were eligible to replace them with their company's own. I felt pretty uncomfortable about this, and pretty peeved that my whole day was gone doing this. The worst part was the girl I was shadowing spent half the day sitting around in the truck reading magazines, and just waiting for people to come home from work. I was sort of asking questions about the job, and she got defensive and said, "Well, I decide if you get this job or not." To which I replied, "Yeah, I don't know if I want to do this." But she kept insisting that it was her who decided if I worked. I don't think she understood that I meant I don't want to do this crap, period. What a waste of a day. Yeah, a lot of companies like this have really sketchy hiring processes, where you think you're applying for one job and then you get dragged out to something like this. I'm sure a lot of people just get an Uber and go home at that point. Found out that the educational assistance they touted in their advertisement applied only to full-time employees, and that they both defined full-time as no fewer than 40 hours and kept anyone that would apply for that assistance from ever being qualified for it. None of this was advertised, and the people I interviewed with assured me, a college student, that working 21 hours a week would get me benefits. Too bad I read my contract before signing it and called them out. Don't lie to your employees, especially during an interview, on something that can be easily and swiftly disproven. If you're willing to lie to me about this, what else are you willing to lie to me about? Mine had to be when I was 18 and working at Blockbuster. I was helping the manager during the before open shift, getting new items stocked on the shelves that came in that morning. My mom called me and told me that my dad was having a heart attack, and she was panicking while waiting for the ambulance. Why did she call me at work to tell me this? The Blockbuster I worked at was in a strip mall type area behind my cul-de-sac. My house and the Blockbuster was separated by a small alley and a 3-minute walk. I told my manager what was happening and asked if I could leave to help my mom while they waited for the ambulance. She said no. I just stood there looking at her, thinking she couldn't be serious. I would be gone for all of 10 minutes and back helping her if needed. She stressed how important it was to get things done that needed to be done, and I could only leave if I called around to the other workers and found someone to come in and cover for me while I was gone. I took off my name tag, slammed it on the counter, and walked out. I never went back for any reason. For any who might wonder, my dad came out fine and was in the hospital for a few days. I was interviewing for a contract position at a very small game development company, and they told me that they were looking for someone to help finish up an existing project. Literally, the game looked like it was made in MS Paint, as if they had just hired some random guy off the street and asked them to make some art for them. Granted, it's a mobile game and sold for the standard 99 cents, so maybe that's not the worst. But the game itself doesn't look engaging at all either. But I figure, worst comes to worst, I could make some money on the side with some low effort. Then they told me that my pay would be a percentage of the sales. Noped right out of that one. I was pretty well qualified, but between jobs and receiving financial support, I get an interview with a small company. I'm looking forward to earning some money again. The boss/interviewer is a huge jerk. At one point, he asks me if I feel guilty that people like him are supporting me. I politely inform him that he'll have to support me a bit longer while I find a suitable job. I tell him that the interview is over, but thanks for your time. I went for a trial shift with a door-to-door sales company. The guy I was partnered up with told me that if he didn't make above the target sales, he was coming out with the equivalent of £3 per hour, which in the UK is well below minimum wage. This was a commission-only, self-employed role. Noped all the way home that day. Here's another example, guys. Just avoid that door-to-door stuff. It's never good for you as the worker. I worked in a bakery. It was my first day, so I get there in the morning to meet everyone. Then they have me grease up the baking trays for the others to fill. I lift up the first tray and like 10 to 15 cockroaches just scatter everywhere from under the tray. I tell the guy showing me the work that there were cockroaches, and he just shrugged. This was all in the back store. Customers were 10 feet away. So I tell the guy I'm not feeling too well after about an hour of doing that, and I head to the bathroom. When I come out, I told him I couldn't do that job, and he told me to get a real job then. So I left and got myself a proper job. I hope you called the health inspector too, 'cause that's just gross. I had an interview at what I thought was a regular steakhouse in a new town I had just moved to. The interview went well. It was just before the restaurant opened, so it was pretty empty. At the end, a waitress starting her shift walked by in buttless chaps and a thong. Turns out that was their uniform. The manager called like 30 minutes later saying I got the job. I had to politely decline that one. Back in college, I used to work part-time as a nanny. One summer, I landed a really sweet-sounding 40-hour-a-week Monday to Friday nannying job, looking after a baby and toddler. I was super excited about all the money I was going to make working that many hours. But the weird thing about this job was that the unemployed dad was also going to be at home with me. He was supposed to be spending all his time looking for a job, and I was watching after the kids while the wife was at work. Literally that first week, on day 2 or 3, he starts hinting about his marriage problems and how his wife sleeps on the couch. The next day, he asks me to try out his fancy new massage chair. I reluctantly agreed, and he just stared at me while I laid on this vibrating chair and was like, "Oh yeah, nice. Great, thanks." He then offered to give me an actual massage sometime, and maybe I wouldn't mind giving him one too. On Friday afternoon, I went home, told my parents who I was living with for the summer everything, and my mom called the guy and told him I wasn't coming back the following Monday, or ever. He then sent me a text message saying he was disappointed in me. Ugh, and his poor wife. This guy just sounds like a total creep. You definitely dodged a bullet on this one. It was my first day working for a family business that had just bought the equipment necessary to install underground fiber optic lines. They had previously been realtors, but had read an article in an entrepreneur's magazine that said $1 million a year gross was common. They pulled their 14 and 17-year-olds out of school to act as laborers, and the mom and dad were going to run separate crews. I was their first employee hire. As I was setting up my bore path, the mom told me we didn't need to expose an electrical line. We would just drill a few feet underneath it, and we didn't need to expose it. I told her that was ridiculous, reckless, and dangerous. The husband then came over and wanted to fight me for insulting his wife. And not 30 seconds into his tirade, the 14 and 17-year-old drilled directly into a large electrical line, which pops the transformer and sounds like an explosion. As I was walking away, the father went from wanting to fight me to chasing his 17-year-old around with a retention pond. The mom was begging me not to leave. Nope. I was unemployed for a couple months and started applying for pretty much any job I could do. This one was a basic small biz IT support contractor. The employee the interviewer introduced to me mouthed "run" when he turned his back. That was enough for me. Shout out to the employee though for giving you the warning. For me, it's when I was cold calling people about injury claims. Have you been injured in the past 3 years? That kind of thing. The thing that really irked me was that all of the people I called in those 20 minutes were polite, said they're not interested, and they were just sitting down for dinner. I quickly realized it was a horrible job, and I was in no way cut out for it. I left after 20 minutes and just walked out the door without a word. I went to my orientation at a boot factory. They're government contracted and so pay minimum wage. So I figured I'd work there a while and look for something better. After we do the usual paperwork signing and such, we're taken as a group onto the factory floor for a tour. It's hot, it's crowded, it stinks, and everyone working looks annoyed by our presence. Okay, I guess not everyone loves their job, right? No biggie. I'm sure this won't be so bad. Then our guide informs us in no uncertain terms that our coworkers quite often give new people bad information to get them in trouble or to make them mess up. They'd even be the ones to rat you out. Then we were told our foreman is the type to yell for no reason, ask people if they're drunk in an accusatory way for no reason, and is generally a giant jerk. I took a few moments to think after these last revelations and said, nah, and walked out of the building without a word to anyone. Screw that, Captain. I'm not putting up with all that for $8 and some change an hour. I work as a nanny, but when I first got into childcare, I was just babysitting. So it was my first night babysitting for this one family. Things went well, changed some diapers, put the baby to sleep, and that was about it. The parents come home and are very drunk. They asked me to stay for a little while after they got back, which was weird. Then they offered me, a 16-year-old at the time, a drink. Feeling a little pressured, I took it and just sipped on it. Then the mom got really close to me and says I probably shouldn't be driving home after having a drink. Once again, feeling a little pressured, I was thinking about accepting. So I asked if I'd just be sleeping on the couch. I'll never forget her next words to me. She says, "Oh no, honey, you'll be going to bed with us." I noped out of there so fast. I think I ran to my car, but it was just kind of a panicked blur. I left my purse there and everything. Second day at Rue 21, and the managers plus other coworkers all went out to lunch together and left me alone in the store. I wasn't able to ring anybody up yet, and the store was packed. I just walked out. When I was 16, I had an interview at a local pizza place in a not so good part of town. I was hired, and as I was walking out, two guys came in and robbed the place. The manager gave them the money in the register and they ran out. I looked at him and he said, "You get used to it." I never went back. Yeah, I don't blame you either. If it's that frequent of an occurrence, it's definitely not a safe place to be spending a lot of your time. I had a job in a salad plant, those bags of salad mix a lot of restaurants use. I was there for 2 weeks coring lettuce. In front of a conveyor belt, 8 hours a day, pick up a head, slam it, pull the core, put it down, next. You talk to your coworkers or you plot the downfall of Western civilization. One really sweet lady had been there for 10 years. 10 years on the lettuce line. She got called into the office and was gone for about a half an hour. She said, "I won't be here tomorrow, I got promoted." I asked what she'd be doing. Cabbage! I didn't quit. I wished her well, dropped my stuff, and walked out. I feel bad about not quitting, but I was young. And, well, 10 years. That was 28 years ago. Had I stayed, I might be up to carrots by now. I sometimes wonder how my life would have been different had I stayed. And in those moments, I celebrate every decision I've ever made. I was hired as an intern manager for a local nonprofit recycling plant. This meant I would hire and train interns for this amazing work opportunity. Turns out for them, interns meant working for free, doing basically everything for the organization event and marketing-wise, while also cleaning the bathroom and taking out the trash for the whole place every week. That's actually super illegal for being way too close to slave labor. I was on contract for minimum 6 months, but I managed to get out of it after 2. I ain't risking my career for their shady business practices. I wanted something part-time when I was at uni. I applied for a position at the local cinema chain and got an interview. It was one of those high turnover places that meant if you got an interview, there was a 95% chance you got a job. The guy at the box office radioed to his manager and was told to take me to room 7. We got to room 7 and wait. And wait, and wait. About 25 minutes pass before the manager starts screaming abuse over the radio because we're not in room 2. So off to room 2 we go on the other side of the building. It's a 15-screen cinema. The manager starts trying to turn on the charm, and I basically say if that's how you treat your employees in front of a job candidate, there's no way I'm ever working for you, and ask the other guy to show me out. I'm sure it made no difference to his behavior, but it saved me a lot of potential abuse. I worked at Claire's for 1 day. At the end of the shift, she asked me to put a bucket load of tiny earring packages back on the walls. A few hours later, I finish, and apparently misplaced a few of them. So she threw all of them on the floor and said to do it again. Nope. Sounds like she just has some kind of power trip. That was completely unnecessary. It was listed as a marketing position. The guy doing the interview started showing me and the other candidate how sharp Cutco knives are. Turns out it was a pyramid scheme. The guy kept asking if I wanted to sign on to buy some knives to sell. The other candidate went to the bathroom and never returned. I felt really awkward, also needed to wait to be picked up, so I stayed for the whole thing. I once saw a Craigslist ad for a stereo salesman. I showed up to a warehouse where a bunch of dudes got into a minivan. The owner told me to go on a run and see how it is, and then talk about the job. Turns out all these guys did was lie and con. They would go up to strangers and say, "Hey man, my cousin's got this stereo, but he got arrested and I don't need it. It's worth $500, but I'll gladly sell it for $200. Then use pushy tactics to get people to go to the ATM and give them money. The system was a piece of crap off-brand, and I overheard the owner saying in bulk it only cost him $20 to buy. Yeah, I noped out of this pretty quickly. I also called the police. JCPenney. I came to work to set up shelves and things, store technician, but my boss handed me a mop and said someone lady pooped in an aisle when she didn't get her way. I handed the mop back and said I'm not hazmat certified, but he is, and noped out of there. My first day on a carpentry job when I was 22, a 20-year-old kid shot me with a nail gun from about 20 feet away. He thought it was hilarious, and so did everyone else, including the company owner. I noped right out of there. Yeah, no kidding. And I hope you called the police, cause that could have been a very serious injury.
What is the most overrated video game of all time? At this point, Pokemon. Ever since it got to 3D, it's gone downhill in terms of gameplay quality. I'm not going to argue about Pokemon designs because my issue is how they never got their Super Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild. Even the Mega Evolutions are fine, but they keep adding and changing gimmick mechanics to the point it feels like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where every entry has to add their own mechanic, and it makes the overarching game a cluster of rules and modifiers. They milk nostalgia so hard like Sword and Shield. So many Gigamax evolutions, special versions of Dynamax, one on new Pokemon, but most were Gen 1 Pokemon. No other company do I see so shielded from their lack of quality and innovation. We even had a taste of an improved gameplay formula in Arceus and us researching Pokemon. We use It's a Kids game as an excuse to make crap when kids deserve good if not better games than us cause they don't have the knowledge to know it's crap. I gotta wholeheartedly agree with this, not the part about Pokemon being generally crap, just that I do think Pokemon as a franchise is shielded far too much for what people get. I mean, it's one of the most goddamn successful franchises in the entire world, and the games are fine, but that's just it. They're fine. I think Scarlet and Violet did look crap though. Like for me personally, X and Y was the last Pokemon game that I actually bought, and then I borrowed Sword or Shield, I can't remember which one, and it was fine, but I really do expect better from one of the most successful franchises in the entire world. Probably the most successful franchise in the world. I'm gonna stick my neck out and say The Last of Us is a cool story to experience once, but as a video game, it's not some 10 out of 10 mind-blowing experience, and people got way too fanatical about it. I personally really enjoyed The Last of Us. I played through it multiple times. I even did a run where I refused to use guns where the game did not force me to. It's a solid game, but it's also one of those games that basically went, oh, a man can only be interesting and deep and philosophical and sad and vulnerable if he has a child around. Like, you know what put me off 2018 God of War? When, oh, Kratos has a son now, and now he's an interesting character. Kratos was already interesting, you cowards. There were already several segments in multiple games that showed the depth of his anguish at the loss of his family and his vulnerability, which he channels through unyielding violence. Far Cry. The first 3 were ahead of the game, but everything since is just copy and pasted. You mean like everything else that Ubisoft make? Oh, I went there. I actually don't really play Far Cry. I've only played Far Cry Primal on the Wii. I actually have Far Cry 2 on my Steam library because it was like £2 or something like that. So maybe I'll give that a go because This guy said, I've heard the original Far Cry's are freaking amazing. But yeah, Ubisoft as a company, I feel like their newer Far Cry games, friggin' Assassin's Creed, they all just kind of blend together in my eyes. I don't really care about them anymore. I used to love Assassin's Creed, and Rayman Origins freaking rocked. Like, Ubisoft used to be a good company.
Overwatch, it's just a shooter, man. It doesn't deserve the worship that it got, and it consistently underdelivers. People assume it has such a deep lore and world, but it really is a bare bone of a basic concept done to death.
I don't take this comment that seriously. I'm not an Overwatch guy. I used to be when it first came out. I played it for ages with friends all the time, but I'm pretty sure the die-hard fans of Overwatch are few and far between at this point, and it is far from an overrated game at this stage. Feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, though. Might be a controversial take, but The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I love it and hate it at the same time. I love the potential, but hate the execution. I love the lore around it, but hate how the game shows barely any of it. I love the world, but hate how empty it is. I love the characters, if they had any character at all. I love and hate it with a passion. I never actually finished The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, but, I think it's a case with open world games where it's very easy to lose steam in them. It was just okay, in my opinion. Not like, it was pretty groundbreaking, I guess, for 2011. God, that's old now. But personally, I was like just getting super into Monster Hunter at that stage in my life. World of Warcraft. The lengths people will go through to try and keep that game playable is astounding. Combat just feels so clunky and repetitive. Okay, so I love Final Fantasy XIV, but I really don't think like combat is like the biggest thing in World of Warcraft. What I like about World of Warcraft is the world and exploring that world. That is dope as hell, exploring Azeroth. I'm gonna catch some crap for this, but BioShock. It never caught flack for being derivative of System Shock, even to the point of being named in an obvious homage to it. Probably because relatively few people actually played System Shock at that point. But if they had, they might have wished BioShock was more derivative of it, because while BioShock dresses itself with the language of immersive sims, it completely failed to deliver on its initial promise of an open-level, play-it-your-way experience. BioShock is a game where you can sneak, but you can't beat the game by sneaking. You can hack, but you can't beat the game by hacking. Open combat is an inevitability. Similarly, the levels are big and open, but it always has a very clear idea of where you're supposed to go next and how you'll get there. I suppose it's appropriate in an ironic way that BioShock only ever gives you the illusion of choice. Speaking of which, the narrative is overall pretty mediocre, aside from the admittedly well-executed twist everyone talks about. Many of the areas, the only reason you're there is that it was between you and your objective, and that it's kind of the tone. It also mostly fails to integrate its political themes. Rapture's liberation vision failed because everyone got a substance that gave them superpowers but made them insane, not because the original vision was ghastly. Similarly, the communist opposition to it failed because the leader was secretly corrupt from the start. The game never really offers an opinion on whether either idea could work or why they would fail. It just kind of plays in the space for a bit before something else makes the question irrelevant. Yeah, I kind of get where they're coming from. I still enjoy BioShock. I haven't played it for a while, but if you really want a game that's really open in the way that you can approach the entirety of it and win in like very specific ways, then play Dishonored. That is an amazing game. That's the game that I will talk about, and people are probably going to turn around and go, oh, that's so overrated though. No. It's a perfect game, actually.
Zelda Breath of the Wild. I am a Zelda fan. I really love the series. I tried my best to get into this game and I wanted to love it, but I just could not as I found it very boring.
Fair enough if they feel that way. Personally, I thought that Breath of the Wild is probably one of the single greatest open world experiences in any video game ever. If anything, I'm having more trouble playing Tears of the Kingdom recently. I just cannot get into that game right now. Maybe it's because I'm just so busy and stuff, or I don't know, maybe it's because it feels a bit too similar to the original game with a lot of added mechanics. Sure, but whatever.
Listen, it's still good, but in no universe should Ocarina of Time win a best game of all time competition. And yet,
I think I disagree with that. I actually think the design philosophy in Ocarina of Time is super good. Z-targeting is still used to this day in many games, although obviously it's not called Z-targeting anymore, it's just lock-on. Like, I don't know, I feel like you could probably take a lot of third-person action games and be like, oh yeah, this kind of originated from Ocarina of Time in this way, you know? I mean, for God's sake, Dark Souls, Elden Ring and all that, it's basically just Ocarina of Time, really, when you get down to gameplay, but it's all polished and smooth and amazing. So personally, I gotta disagree with that. I think Ocarina of Time frickin' rocks, actually. And I ain't even talking from a place of nostalgia. I played that game for the first time all the way through on the 3DS. Controversial opinion, the Dark Souls franchise. I think most of its difficulty is artificially created by clunky controls and a deliberate vagueness about how to tackle enemies. The people who love this game will say these are exactly the things that make it so great and I just need to get good scrub. Opinions differ and that's fine, but for me it feels like a disingenuous way to make things more difficult. I couldn't disagree with this person more. In my opinion, Dark Souls and Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and Dark Souls 3, but not Dark Souls 2, use a lot of context and logic in the way that they do level design and enemy placement. Easy example, Sen's Fortress. If you run straight in there, you will notice that the first thing that happens is you activate a trap. This establishes a tone and establishes what you need to look out for and the kind of things that this place has up its sleeves. And if you don't adapt to stop and analyze the area for dangers and whatnot, where you can and where you feel safe to, then you're gonna be fine. But if you just rough rod right in there, then you're gonna die. I frickin' love Dark Souls. I can't wait for Armored Core, but I feel bad for the OG fans because Armored Core is not Dark Souls. Black and White, Molyneux's magnum opus, was just a glorified Tamagotchi. Never played Black and White 1, but I did love Black and White 2 as a kid. Red Dead Redemption 2, because it's just not fun to play, which, for me, is what a video game should be, Dutch. I'm actually playing through this game for the first time recently, and it's not that it's not fun, but it's certainly a bit annoying when the game, forces me to beat a guy because I need to catch tuberculosis or, the 2-hour intro and stuff. Still a good game, but I agree, it is definitely overrated. Honestly, Final Fantasy VII is extremely overrated. The story isn't that interesting, and the majority of other elements remain the same from previous entries. In my opinion, it only became so popular because it was the first disc-based Final Fantasy game and launched on the PS1 during its amazing sales point. Just about everyone had a PS1. Most of the ads for FF7 were promoting multiple discs, CG cutscenes, advanced graphics, and so on. FF7 released at the right time and at the right place, but it is by far one of the weaker entries. Oh, I shouldn't have chosen this topic. I want to talk about these things so much. But I disagree. I think the original Final Fantasy VII is actually really freaking special. If we're talking about the remake, I don't think it's crap by any means, but I really don't like the changes they made to the remake. I'll leave it there because I've got a job to do, but god damn it, does it pain me not to talk about this in more detail. The Call of Duty franchise. Literally the same game every single time. I may have said it earlier, but I don't like military shooters, unless they have, a gimmick to them like Titanfall 2 or something. But I actually don't think every Call of Duty game is exactly the same. If you go back far enough and then go to where we are now, there have been major changes to the game. Maybe now, more recently, the games are probably being more and more similar, but I don't even see them get released as frequently as they used to be. Death Stranding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure upon release, the game actually did not sell that well, at least not in Hideo Kojima's eyes. I heard he had a bit of a fit that people didn't really get the game and that he's an auteur and he's ahead of his time, which I like Hideo Kojima, but I think Hideo Kojima, overall, kind of overrated, actually. Especially since he's been, rubbing elbows with, Hollywood actors and directors and stuff and just shoving them haphazardly into his video games. As much as it pains me to say it, I think Minecraft is pretty overrated. Perhaps not the most of all time, but nonetheless so. I have quite a few friends who absolutely refuse to play anything other than Minecraft, just because they are so convinced that it is the best video game of all time, and all others are trash. I definitely don't agree with that, but that isn't the only reason I think it is overrated. Honestly, Minecraft has lost a lot of its charm over the years. The gameplay is simple and not extremely engaging. The only reason I use it today is for creative builds. Also, it was never and still isn't worth $30 goddamn. I actually haven't played Minecraft since it initially came out. My brother got the beta for it. The Binding of Isaac. Meh. It alright. The Binding of Isaac is super good. I love the way that items pile onto each other to make cool mixtures, but I actually prefer one of the creators' earlier games called Gish. Hogwarts Legacy. Yeah, I think that major attempt at boycotting that game just ended up having the reverse effect that people wanted.
Red Dead Redemption 2. I have never played a game that someone went to such effort to build a massive, well-engineered and detailed wilderness, only to fill it with so little that it brought me nearly to tears with boredom. But so many people rave about this game, and I will never understand it.
Like I said, I've been playing it recently, and I do think it's a good game, but I think this is just the problem with massive open-world games. There is very little that they can do to fill these worlds in a satisfying way that isn't better done than a small, concentrated world where you can absolutely stuff it to the brim with good, solid content. That can then feed into level design, theming for the area, etc. I'm not going to go into this anymore.
Shadow of the Colossus. Apart from visuals, the game was a chore to play.
You know, I actually prefer Eco a little more than Shadow of the Colossus, but Shadow of the Colossus to me is more like an experience. Like, there's no other game like it.
God of War Ragnarok. I'm sorry, but it just didn't do it for me. Completely underwhelming. Felt more like a mountain climbing simulator than anything. And Kratos literally only kills one frickin' god the entire gameplay. WTF. I get he's changing in a different person, but really, the ghost of Sparta needs help to fight Odin's old female dog butt. And sure, he beats Thor the second fight, but he forgives Thor and doesn't want to hurt him, despite Thor trying to kill his son earlier. Instead of God of War, I got God of holding hands and licking buttholes.
Little bit extreme at the end there, but no, I get where he's coming from. I still stand by that. People try to say that these new games have more depth than the original ones, but I think it's just people didn't really pay attention to the old games. I have no idea if this was considered good, and I've never played a Kojima game, but Death Stranding. I have never experienced a piece of media so far up its own butt. Like 6 minutes of gameplay in the first 2 hours of the game. The biggest challenge in that time was walking in a straight line, utterly confusing menus, the wild swings between characters staring at nothing and explaining nothing, and ham-fisted exposition, a riveting chase scene except the land is shrouded in fog and the monsters are invisible, a soulless world with like 5 people in it, 2 of which have dead or die in their name, who constantly introduce themselves like they aren't the only people we've ever met, and freedom of camera movement during the interminable cutscenes. If you're going to just make a movie, at least give us cinematography. I swear I only played as long as I did because I couldn't believe the game would continue to be so bad. I'm convinced it's End of Evangelion the game, a double middle finger to his fans who will buy anything of his, so he made a pile of nonsense to watch their mental gymnastics explain why the game is secretly genius. The only reason I might be bringing up some games twice is because people are actually explaining why they didn't like it, and I've never played this game, and that's all I really have to say about it. I played every Borderlands game from start to finish and I hated them. I kept assuming they would suddenly get better and I would understand why people loved them. Nope. I admittedly find the writing of Borderlands 3, which was the latest one that I played recently, abysmal, but you know, I think the games have merits. The shooting's fun, the random gun loot is cool, and yeah, they're okay. Hollow Knight. I get it, Metroidvanias aren't for everyone, it's easy to get lost in it, even with the map to some degree, but god damn it, may the power of Christ compel you! Gears of War, Monster Hunter, Final Fantasy. I don't get why these IPs are so popular. Popularize the third-person cover-based shooter, tracking monsters, fighting monsters, building new weapons to fight more monsters out of the monsters that you previously fought is awesome. One of the first video game IPs to tell an engaging and ambitious narrative. First-person shooters. It doesn't matter what the name is, it's all the goddamn same thing, repackaged over and over and over again. Clearly you don't play enough first-person shooters because they do in fact vary wildly. I absolutely love Hunt Showdown because it's a lot more methodical and slow-paced. I don't feel like I can just die the instant I get ambushed a lot of the time because the guns aren't automatic and whatnot. That's just one example of a first-person shooter I like, though. Heavy Rain. I know people crap on it now, but it did very well when it first came out. Same with Beyond Two Souls and Detroit Become Human.
David Cage is a funny one. I've not played a single one of his games. I can see that he tries to push the envelope a little bit in his own way, but I kind of put him in the same category as Telltale games, where they're games that I will simply watch someone else play. Cuphead. I never understood the appeal of it. To me, it's just a 2D platformer with quick mechanics and old-fashioned animation style and difficult bosses. I don't think it's a bad game, by the way. I've been playing that with my girlfriend lately, and she's so much better than me at it. She's absolutely carrying the team. But I don't know, I think that Cuphead is sort of an instant classic just based on the amount of time and effort that went into it. If you look at the original trailer, it looks so bare bones compared to what it became. Horizon Zero Dawn. I was excited to play this game when it first came out, and honestly, I found it tedious and a bit basic and bland. I'd have preferred it to be a linear game as opposed to open world because there isn't enough in the world for it to be that enjoyable. I think that's just it in the end. Open world games are overrated. We need to return to smaller, more directed and concentrated areas in games where, like I said earlier, you can concentrate on theming, you can base level design and missions around it. But most of all, I think it's a big part that people do not like about open world games. You can make traversal of the world more engaging. Any battle royale. It was cool at first, then the novelty of it wore off years ago. It is literally a running simulator, and the design of the mode itself promotes people to play like absolute rats and hide in buildings the whole entire frickin' match. Absolute dog crap, trash piece of crap genre that I can't wait to see die so I can wee on its grave. Not sure if I go that far about my feelings of the genre, but I thought it was cool when they made a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Battle Royale game, and then I looked at it and it looked kind of crap. Dare I say, Assassin's Creed is a walking simulator with occasional action and stealth tactics. Yeah, I dropped off Assassin's Creed after Brotherhood, admittedly, mostly because I wanted to play the multiplayer, which I still think is actually a really cool multiplayer mode. Ghost of Tsushima. Game was okay, but it was overhyped in my opinion. I actually think Ghost of Tsushima got absolutely robbed for Game of the Year in 2020. Hades was good, but it was in early access for freaking ages. I know it was the official time where it was finished and everything, but I don't think it even deserved to be there because it was in early access for so long. Honestly, I kind of think the only reason The Last of Us 2 actually won Game of the Year in 2020 is because it met all the ESG regulations. PT. Whenever there is talk about horror games, lots of people talk about it as if it is the pinnacle of horror games. Hell, it was a demo of an eventually shelved product. Yo, I don't care what you say. That game was scary as a mother. I literally dropped my control screaming into my full English dinner while playing it with a friend. But it was also quite maddening to figure out how to proceed in that game. In my opinion, probably GoldenEye. I was playing PC games at the time. Quake, Team Fortress was already out, and my expectations were built up by people who hadn't played an FPS before. Same type of thing happened when Halo released on Xbox, and people acted like it was the first game with LAN play. Had trouble deciding between GoldenEye and Halo, but I at least had some fun with Halo games. GoldenEye always felt like a clumsy attempt to me. I have never had a good time playing GoldenEye, so I agree.
Guys who married Bridezillas, what happened after the wedding? My first wife was a Bridezilla. During our honeymoon, she realized she was married and the wedding day was history. She wanted the big wedding, which she had, not the actual marriage. The next 2 years were miserable until she finally tapped out. I was young and stupid, and the thought of divorce never crossed my mind. I don't know why it didn't. I guess I just assumed I'd be miserable the rest of my life. When she told me she was leaving, it felt as if the weight of the world was off of my shoulders. On a happy note, her parents were still paying off the wedding when we divorced. That's what happens when you allow your daughter everything she wanted, including 2 wedding dresses. I have a feeling this is how a lot of these stories are gonna go. They wanted the big wedding, and then once it's over, they realize they don't really care so much anymore. One of my coworkers married a Bridezilla. I'll try to just hit the bullet points of what happened leading up to, during, and after the wedding, but it's still a lot. The moment he proposed, she lost any interest in any woohoo. According to him, she also basically stopped acting like the woman he fell in love with and started acting like her real self, which was completely crazy. A week after he proposed, she quit her job because her full-time job was now planning the wedding. The wedding was horrible, but I'm getting there. She had a fight with his mother because the bride demanded the groom's mom pay for half the wedding, but get zero input, and wasn't allowed to contribute to the guest list, which was 95% the bride's friends and family. The bride, who was 30 years old, subsequently egged her future mother-in-law's house. When the bride and groom had a fight about the egging, he went to work the next day and she shaved her head and sent him a video of her screaming and sobbing as she buzzed her hair off in the bathroom. I worked with him. He showed me the video when he said he had to leave. I strongly urged him to have her assessed by a psychiatrist. Jump to the wedding. It was in a pool clubhouse in the summer. It was way too small for the 150 plus people they invited. Someone forgot to turn the AC on until after the place was packed. A lifeguard showed up in a swimsuit to turn it on, but it did little given it was already sweltering. 2 rows of chairs in the clubhouse were ribboned off with reserved signs on them, so no one sat in them. They were later occupied by the 6 seated bridesmaids, leaving about a dozen open chairs once the wedding started. The one groomsman stood by the groom and didn't sit. Elderly people were left standing or reduced to sitting on the floor, as there was no way to get to the chairs once the ceremony started. The bride showed up 90 minutes late, having been unhappy with her hair, which I assume was a wig, and makeup, so she took it all off and did it herself. So all the guests are standing there for an hour and a half waiting for her. The groom was literally standing at the altar sweating his butt off in a wool suit in the South's high summer, and was clearly not sure if she would show up. He looked like he felt sick. When the bride showed up, she burst into the clubhouse, marched down the aisle, and snapped at the officiant to hurry up and get started. During the prayer, while the religious groom had his head bowed, she turned to wave at everyone. I don't pray, so I was looking up. Then she told her mother to go get her some water. She drank a bottle of water during the prayer and kept grinning and waving at people in attendance, paying zero mind to her groom in front of her. When the ceremony was over, tables were crammed into the clubhouse and apparently only family and immediate friends of the bride had seats at tables. The rest of us were going to be standing outside during the reception. So I didn't see a dance, a speech, the cake cut, nothing. The food was served outside in the southern US July heat, with bugs everywhere. The bride made the groom go get her food over and over. He meekly stood in line with the other 150 people, until people insisted he go sit and let them get the food. Nope, she told him to get the food, so he said he had to be the one to get her food. She never left her table, never greeted any of her guests. Apparently, they had a massive fight as they were leaving the following day for the honeymoon. The bride laying all the failures of the wedding she planned at him and his mom's feet. She threw his luggage out of the car and tried to drive to the airport by herself. But he had their tickets and jumped on the hood to stop her from driving off in his car. He got fired about a month after the wedding because he kept showing up late, leaving early, and leaving in the middle of the day, usually because she called him with some crisis. 1 year after the wedding, I got a thank you note for my wedding gift, which was signed by just the bride with a note that said, "As you may have heard, Ryan and I have had a bumpy start in our first year as a married couple, and we're separated now. Thanks for the lovely gift." They divorced a couple months later. You know, I know what I was getting into with this thread, but I can't help but just feel bad for all these guys. I married a Groomzilla, bent over backwards to make the wedding as magical as he wanted. I would have been happy in someone's backyard with a potluck. He admitted in couples counseling 7 years later that he never really wanted to marry me, so much as he just wanted a huge show and party. Everyone liked and approved of me, so he wanted them all to see he was making a good choice and be envious. He wanted them to be proud of him. We used up most of the money I got from a car accident settlement. Could have put a down payment on a small house. He asked for a divorce in 2020. They had an expensive $75,000 wedding. After they split up, it turned out the bride never turned in the paperwork to make their marriage legal. The groom didn't even know he wasn't married until he wanted to file for divorce. The bride never returned the gifts either, even though they never really got married. She just lied to everyone about it. I don't know how many people know she never got married. This sounds like it would be illegal in some way, no? My brother married a Bridezilla. She yelled at my mother on the day of for asking her where she wanted certain decorations at the reception site. There wasn't a written plan, so my mom had nothing to go off of. Never thanked my parents for financially contributing to the wedding. Accused a bridesmaid of trying to upstage her by getting a spray tan before the wedding. My brother wanted me to be in the wedding party, but she told him to his face that I was too pretty to be in the wedding party and all of her bridesmaids had to be less attractive than her. She stole my sister-in-law's jacket in the middle of the reception. Literally took it right off her back, because one of the bridesmaids was cold. It was a night reception in the spring. The girl should have brought a jacket. The list goes on. Well, they got divorced about a year later because apparently her demanding attitude carried over into the marriage. Needless to say, the rest of my family had a little party when we heard about the divorce. She sounds like a piece of work, but is there literally any compliment more objectively true than being told you're too attractive for the wedding party by a vapid narcissist? Not a Bridezilla, but a Groomzilla. A friend of my father was remarrying. It was both his and his bride's second time around, both in their early 40s, and an arranged marriage. The guy was an utter Groomzilla. He demanded that everything be at top-notch hotels with obscenely expensive catering and hired string quartets and whatnot for the entertainment. Mostly paid out of the bride's family's pocket, I might add. The parties on the night leading up to the main wedding event were opportunity enough for him to make a rather public fool of himself, talking at the top of his voice and showboating the entire time. But the kicker came the next day, when the bride was missing from her own wedding reception. Obviously, it was very odd and conspicuous, and the few relatives from her side made some non-committal excuses for her not feeling well. Turns out, this jerk had divorced the poor woman right after he'd had his wedding night fun. He said that he didn't like her enough, and that's an almost literal quote. So he gave her the divorce papers and that was it. The marriage was officially over before the festivities even ended. That's gotta be close to a record turnaround time, right? But seriously, that guy is a massive jerk. My cousin was married to one. He comes from a very not wealthy area and has become successful himself after moving out of his hometown. His wife was extremely wealthy, even could say excessively. They married after a year of knowing each other, and boy was it a surprise to hear about the wedding plans. They spent over $250,000 on the wedding, including catering by 5 to 7 different restaurants. Their food was from different cultures and cooked in front of you. Think almost hibachi buffet style. They even had servers in tailed suits and white gloves serving Taco Bell after midnight once everyone was drunk. Once they got married, she was spending more money than he could make. She was getting mad because he wasn't making enough, while she wasn't working and they hadn't had any kids. They got divorced, and she gave him the ultimatum of getting his ring back or keeping the dog. He kept the dog. Her sister, a lawyer, helped her file a restraining order on him, and they haven't spoken since. Screw her, but man did he dodge a bullet. $250,000 is an insane amount of money for a wedding. Our guy made the right decision keeping the dog, though. I married a Groomzilla. We're talking costume changes between wedding and reception, yelling at the wedding planner, dragged out fights about whether we can add fruit kebabs so people would get enough to eat, everything. There was zero compromise. He made a lot of promises for things I had been wanting after the wedding, and they never materialized, like a beach vacation and such. Turns out, no compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else, so I left him after 4 years of marriage. Best decision ever. No compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else is probably about the best way you could sum up this entire thread. A friend of my husband's who he's known since they were kids, so about 20 years now, married a Bridezilla. She's evangelical and religion is pretty much her life, and he was agnostic, a nice metalhead geek guy. They asked us to be the best man and woman. Me and my husband are both tattooed, and when we arrived at the wedding, we were his only friends. Everyone in that big wedding was from her, now also his, church. Well, the preacher kept saying to him he had his old life and now his new life, his old friends and now the new friends, yada yada yada. But all the time criticizing his old ways, the authentic way. And everyone kept looking at me and my husband like we were beasts. Worst day ever. She's that kind of person that wants to be an influencer. Every single thing is in her Instagram. Their relationship seems perfect there, but he always seems so unhappy, so apathetic, especially when we used to see him. Always talking about how things are so different, how things are like she wants. Her stories are basically her saying he does nothing right. It's even humiliating. She made him stop talking to us. This last week, he got out of every group we had. He stopped answering my husband, who's very sad that he lost one of his friends. I believe she's the one replying with the few weird messages he does get. That's the Bridezilla. It seems very common for the Bridezilla to act on social media, but in real life, it's all messy. It honestly sounds like these two were very different from each other when they got married. Like, these two lifestyles don't really mesh together. I feel like he must have known he was going to be giving everything up to marry her. My girlfriend of 10 years is very down to earth and level-headed. We finally decided to get married later this year for a few reasons, and she's feeling a lot of phantom pressure to do things a certain way. It's not like there's an overbearing mom or catty friends applying pressure or expectations. It's just the whole idea is overwhelming and filled to the brim with opportunities to make a decision you might end up regretting later or forever. I've taken a more active role in narrowing down options instead of asking her to pick a perfect solution out of 5 million possible options. It's helped somewhat, but there's still a lot of pressure on her seemingly out of nowhere to make a series of decisions that all depend on the first few big decisions that are weighing heavily on us. All this to say, I can see how this kind of stuff could turn a normal woman into a lunatic. These types of events tend to bring latent family and friend drama to the forefront, and emotions are high before anything even really gets started. My guess is that a lot of Bridezillas were actually lovely people who calmed down and returned to being lovely people after the stress of wedding stuff is removed. This is the other side of the coin. Planning a wedding does have a lot involved, and there are a lot of general expectations. It's understandable how a normal person could get overwhelmed. Before reading these comments, I thought a Bridezilla was a woman huge and strong enough to be compared to Godzilla, and entered the thread eagerly expecting to read stories about grooms getting lifted and carried off into the sunset on their wedding day. I'm very disappointed. My uncle married one. She had a spending problem, went clubbing in her 40s thinking she was 20, acted like she was better than everyone, couldn't keep friendships, and cheated on my uncle with a man 10 to 15 years her junior. My uncle is remarried and happy now. Sounds like she never quite grew up and just wanted to live her life as a party. That's definitely a red flag. Been married 14 years now. She's definitely a pain in the butt sometimes, but so is everyone else. I'm also pretty laid back, so a lot of decisions I leave to her because I just don't care. If it's a decision I do care about, I make the decision. Without her, I wouldn't have the 3 best kids on earth. She's an amazing mom, and our kids have our best qualities. We have fun all the time. I think she was a Bridezilla not because she was a crazy person. It was more about making the moment right for everyone and making it a great memory. She had a relatively rough life with her parents, and there weren't a ton of great memories. I noticed she goes way out of her way to make great memories for the kids, as she's always planning stuff for us to do with them. I'm gonna keep her. I married a Bridezilla. In the 18 months we were married, she was such an unfit mother with too many instances to list here that when the divorce was finalized, I got custody of our kid and the kid she had prior to our marriage. Also, she was a blackout drunk and cheated on me with several different men. The final straw was when I had to travel out of state to check on my grandmother. I came back a day early, saw used Marlboros in the ashtray, not her brand, and I don't smoke, and then I heard grunting and groaning in the bedroom. Yep, there she was, and there he was, and there he was. Devil's Triangle. I contacted a divorce lawyer the next day, finalized it as fast as possible. Ding ding ding, we have a winner. My uncle married this lady who was an insane Bridezilla and put him into an enormous amount of debt because she wouldn't settle for anything less than her perfect dream wedding. She had the marriage annulled after the fancy honeymoon and said she didn't want to be his wife, but she always wanted to have her dream wedding. Jerk. My cousin was an unbelievable bridezilla. About a year after their horrifying wedding, her husband convinced her to seek help for her mental health. 5 years later, she's in a much better place and they're happy. Just in case anyone wanted a happy story. My girlfriend's former friend was a bridezilla. Didn't smile once at her own wedding because she was too busy freaking out over insignificant details. Although she has a master's degree with unpaid college loans, she's now a permanent stay-at-home mom, an anti-vaxxer, and a conspiracy theorist. She spends her days getting into Facebook beefs with anyone who isn't woke enough. No idea how her husband hasn't gone crazy, cause as far as I know, he's not into any of that. She sounds like exactly the type of person you would expect a stereotypical bridezilla to be. My sister decided to marry a fellow she'd been with for less than 4 months. Second marriage. It was spur of the moment, with less than 1 month notice. Let's all fly across Canada for a lovely East Coast wedding. Flying across Canada is expensive. Anyways, I had just started a new job and it was imperative that I be there at work during her wedding time. Not the slightest option of time off. I would have been let go. She didn't talk to me for over a year. The marriage lasted around a year, if that. She took him for everything. He lost his house, his car, and drank himself out of his job. She even took his dog. Other family members stepped in and gave him his dog back. She's a peach. Single if anyone's looking. My first marriage was to a bridezilla. She got drunk before the ceremony and wouldn't dance because she was too anxious people would make fun of her. She tried bragging to my cousins during the dinner that our wedding was better than theirs. The 4 of us got married in a 2-year span. She invited her ex-boyfriend to the ceremony that I later found out she had been sleeping with both before and after our wedding. She took the money we'd received as gifts and were planning on using for a house down payment and spent it on random crap. She had a ton of debt that she kept from me as well. I left her a year after to the day and never looked back. I'm now happily married to a great woman. Obviously, hindsight yada yada, but there were a lot of red flags I should have noticed. Here are some of the big things she did after the wedding. She spent money quicker than she could make it. I ended up having to take on a second job, and I already worked 50 plus hours a week, all just to cover the bills. She started using substances and stopped going to work. She would visit her friends in the evening. Found out later on she was going to her boyfriends. The final straw was when I found out what she was doing with the money. I didn't know at first she was into substances. Online payment of bills weren't as popular when we were married, so I would give her the money to go and pay some during banking hours. One day, I got pulled over and charged with no insurance on my vehicle. Turns out she was taking the money for bills and buying substances. When the notices for no payment would come in the mail, she would hide them or rip them up. I handed her the separation papers on our 1-year anniversary. I, 21-year-old female at the time, married a groomzilla, 25. I wanted to elope because I didn't like the idea of being stared at by people. He demanded a wedding of 200 plus. He had my parents build a giant gazebo on our farm. Said he'd help pay for building costs. Me and my dad built it by hand with our neighbor. He was always working. Don't get me wrong, he helped a few weekends, but it was a year-long project. Shortly after the wedding, we retired to our hotel, and he didn't want to consummate. I was like, okay, long day, I get it. 3 months into a sexless marriage, I walk into him banging our 60-ish-year-old male neighbor. I opened my bedroom door, saw what was happening, said I was sorry, shut the door, got my dog, and drove home to mommy and daddy as stayed away. Why did I say I was sorry and not yell? I'll never know. Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Taking trauma call during surgery residency, I had a prisoner come in after a fight and claimed he couldn't move or feel his legs. All the CT scans and MRIs were normal, but we would shield his legs so he couldn't see them and poke them with needles and other sharp objects with enough force to cause pain. He never flinched or moved his legs at all. He was diagnosed with SIWORA, which stands for spinal cord injury without radiographic abnormality. He stayed in the hospital for a week. No improvement. Always had one guard with him. One night, they were down in the lobby watching some television, but the guard needed to use the restroom. The patient said, "Where could I possibly go? I'm paralyzed." The guard left him alone for 2 minutes. The patient was last seen sprinting down the road, naked butt cheeks flapping in the breeze. Made it to a city 4 hours away by car before he was caught again. I've never seen anyone fake it so well. truly playing the long con. Yeah, this guy had a plan and he was seeing it through to the end. Dermatologist here. Patient was convinced she had a melanoma and needed a biopsy and would need to be on workers' comp. I told her it looked like ink from a marker. She demanded a biopsy. I wiped the area off with an alcohol swab and showed her the ink and that there was no spot on her skin anymore. She stormed out, threatening to sue. I'm just glad I cured her melanoma. You truly are a miracle worker, Doc. Had a patient come in for a fall who now couldn't move their legs at all. Did a bunch of tests and didn't find anything. The patient was not at all fazed by suddenly being paralyzed, which was the first red flag. Didn't really believe anything was wrong, but the patient was still not moving their legs. My options are to admit for a huge workup or get them to walk. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative, you can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed, and walks out without a word. So we're not even going to acknowledge the fact that you just completely lied? Not a doctor, but I worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis, she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5 times during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into doing an exploitive laparoscopic surgery. Of course, nothing was found. One day, I walked in and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage, trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell. Really, she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners. Anything. As long as they wrote her a prescription and she got to go to the pharmacy where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time, she fluttered her eyes after making sure I was looking and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes. She called the insurance and claimed it was 10 minutes. She called the pharmacy and claimed it was 30 minutes. Then she called 911 and told them she woke up on the floor after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and by all the stories of his childhood illnesses and her saying how he's severely disabled, I knew she basically screwed up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled, and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him. He was healthy and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that. No, I don't blame you. It sounds like you paid your dues with this woman for a while. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. A young woman, maybe around 18 to 20 years old, went running into a small rural hospital ER pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40+ kilometers over the speed limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario. Impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into the ER and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the ER had pre-printed orders set to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents or family before I booted her. Except BHCG came back positive, and subsequent ultrasounds came back showing extremely early ectopic. The officer figures out something's up when he hears an air ambulance call come in over the radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. She's incredibly lucky she ran away from the police. You don't get to say that often. Pediatric neuropsychologist here. Got a referral for more or less consolidation care. Patient was 13, wheelchair bound, required therapeutic oxygen, seizures, arthritis, musculoskeletal problems, suspected autism, completely nonverbal, severe behavior challenges, the list goes on. He was being followed by at least 8 different specialities. Clearly, none of whom were communicating with each other, and the med list was around 18 prescriptions long, including some incredibly heavy-duty stuff. Opioids, antipsychotics, antiepileptics, that sort of stuff. Got kicked to me after his upteenth ER trip because the ER doctor felt something was off, and he needed someone to look at the whole picture. Factitious disorder by caregiver or Munchausen by proxy. All of the original symptoms were parent-reported, going back to about a year old. It possibly started with a fever-induced seizure in infancy, but this was never witnessed by anyone but mom. She's been telling docs different things. She was convinced her son had all these disorders, told him he was gonna die any day. He got a Make-A-Wish trip, donations, all kinds of things. He was removed from her custody and taken off most of his meds. Within a few weeks, he was out of the wheelchair, playing basketball, no oxygen, super talkative and friendly, and no behavior problems. He did have a pretty significant intellectual disability, but there's no way to say if that was organic or the result of the prescription cocktail he had been fed all his life. Hopefully, with some good therapy and a stable home, he can continue to make progress. Some parents just really know how to mess up their kids. Physical therapist here. Working mom comes into the clinic with her infant in a stroller. She's limping like she's got a nail in her foot, wincing in pain and tears in her eyes. She's crying during her visit with the PT. None of us think she's faking it. She limped out of the clinic. I glanced out of the window and saw this woman bounding down the sidewalk, hips swaying, full stride, going places. We were all fools. I guess she was just there for painkillers or something? Whenever we had kids, usually teenagers, playing up their symptoms to extend their hospital stay, we would order them into a healthy lifestyle. Lights out at 9, no screen time for 2 hours before bed, healthy diet chock full of fruits and vegetables, screen time limits, minimum number of laps around the unit per day to get in their exercise. They got better so much faster with our healthy lifestyle tips. My brother was an EMT for 2 years, and he told me this. People will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego because the hospital's in Oswego by faking seizures. Sometimes when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures but not peeing himself." Apparently, the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. Sorta along the same idea. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy come in to try and get a refill on some pain meds that had no refill. After pleading that his ear really hurt, we told him again we couldn't refill it. One of the other employees saw him step into a side hallway, take a pencil, and jam it forcefully into his ear repeatedly, drawing blood. He calmly left and went to the ER. He came back a few hours later with a prescription for pain meds. Oh, this one really bothers me. This isn't faking. This dude has an addiction and apparently will do whatever it takes to get his pain meds. This patient comes in for back pain with weakness of the legs, gets a full workup with MRI, standard blood work, and then some immunological things to look for stuff like myasthenia gravis. No neurological or immunological explanation for the weakness. Patient is seen by physical therapy and they're of the opinion that the patient is holding back intentionally. Go to see the patient at the end of the day and prep them for discharge. Patient is infuriated that they're being discharged, yelling and screaming about how they aren't better, how they're disappointed in the institution, and blah blah blah. They said one particular thing that still clearly stands out 3 to 4 years later.
"I can't believe you're sending me home already. I haven't even told my family I'm here, and now you're gonna send me home before they even have the chance to see me?
My attending and I leave the room to arrange things with the nurses. We go back in and the patient is out of bed and standing up in the middle of the room. Miraculously, the patient is able to walk with zero assistance, when they had so much difficulty walking with assistance over the past 2 days. At that point, they were enraged we went in the room without knocking. They were discharged home after having a conversation regarding abuse of medical services. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attending one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hello wave. She started to throw her arm up too, but caught herself halfway through, then threw her hand back in her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking, tried to keep his eyes rolled back into his head, the whole 9 yards. He said he's a famous YouTube rapper that's now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard him before, and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course his eyes were back to normal and focused. Come on, man, you're gonna fall for that? One time my roommate, who's an ICU nurse, came to see one of my indoor soccer games. During the game, a player on the other team went down hurt and started screaming in pain and swearing and rolling around while holding his ankle, before he eventually was helped off the field. He then limped over to where the fans sat and watched the rest of the game brooding in silence before he left early. After the game, my roommate told me he was going to go over and see if there was anything he could do to help, until he saw that the guy was limping on the wrong leg. How did no one else notice this? Only the nurse caught on to the fact that the guy's limping on the foot that he hurt? Was told this one by a fellow nurse I used to work with when we had a psych floor. It's not unusual for psych patients to stash things in various orifices. This one woman was convinced she was impregnated by a ghost-like figure, but no one would believe her. So one day, she started complaining of massive pelvic and uterine pain. She called them contractions. So the doctor goes to do an exam. The doctor feels something larger in there, so they prep a table to get the object out, which was quite large. So the wonderful third year helping with the procedure starts hearing this woman complain of contractions and yelling things like, "Should I push? I'm gonna start pushing!" The doctor is trying to work forceps around this woman's parts as to not hurt her. Finally goes, "Got," and as he starts saying it, pulls out a baby doll, head only. The poor med student did the wobble, went all flush and had problems keeping balance and about took a dive. I was told he didn't live that down the whole rotation. I mean, I don't blame the poor kid. In his mind, he just saw a baby's head get ripped off. I once saw a patient who had been faking paralysis of the legs for years, used a wheelchair, and never walked. Old records showed extensive imaging, neurology consults, and other tests that proved the patient had full function of all his extremities. Family and friends were just going along with it, not sure if it was really conversion disorder or if the patient had some secondary gain issue. Not a doctor, but am a UK-based midwife. Had a patient who had been in and out of hospital throughout her pregnancy with episodes of heavy bleeding. This was her 6th baby, so she was a fairly well-known patient in our unit. The issue was no one had ever seen her actively bleeding. She'd call saying that she had bled down the toilet but flushed it. All the examinations we did came back completely normal with mostly no evidence of any bleeding whatsoever. On occasion, during spectrum examinations, we'd see the smallest amount of blood. I was caring for her during a shift where she yet again called to say she was bleeding. I walked into her room and found her jabbing her private area with a sharp object to make herself bleed. She'd been doing it the entire pregnancy. The reason she gave? Because she had 5 noisy children at home, she needed some rest, and knew we wouldn't admit her to the hospital if it wasn't for a good reason. She would do it any time her being discharged home was mentioned. We ended up having to complete a prenatal mental health referral and consult with the safeguarding midwives, as she was putting herself and the baby at risk of serious harm. I understand needing to get away from the kids for a little bit, but this is an extreme. Ophthalmology technician. People pretend to be blind all the time. I go to check their eye pressure with the Tono pen, a device you poke them directly in the eye with, and they go, "What the heck is that thing?" I'm a nurse. We had a guy who had to come in every 3 months to get a medical certificate to say he couldn't work at his retail job due to severe disabling back pain. He was receiving large amounts of insurance money for this condition. After the doctor had done his usual examinations and questions and signed it off, the guy asks the doctor to check his shoulder, which Doc does and asks how he injured it. The guy says playing rugby for a competitive team. "Really?" says the doc. "How long have you been playing for them?" Guy's been playing and training the whole time. Doc puts this info on the insurance form. The doc lost it in the staff room laughing. Next week, the patient loses his mind in reception because his insurance has been cancelled. You kinda brought this one on yourself, my friend. Back when I was a nurse, a guy came into the ER for a stomachache. When asking him about history, he randomly mentions a fight with his girlfriend where she left in a tizzy and he fell asleep on the couch. 20 minutes later, when we see the CT, he has a satellite cable remote wrapped in a condom lodged in his rectum. I'm guessing he was intending to frame her. I didn't get to hear the conversation he had with the doctor. I was curious how he was going to explain why she was nice enough to wrap it in the condom. This has gotta be one of the stupidest plans I've ever heard. I'm a nurse, not a doctor. I had a patient who worked in a hospital as a janitor, so he knew enough to fake a bit. He was seeking pain meds, complaining of chest pain and wanting morphine. He was worked up for everything cardiac and was fine. Then he tried to claim GI discomfort when he was being discharged. Cleared again for everything. So he faked chest pain again. Cleared again. Now he's my patient. I'm a new face. He tells me he's having abdominal pain. I call the doctor, knowing this guy's history. He says he'll be up to see him soon. This patient wants a ginger ale, some stomachache. I decided to go to lunch. My coworker comes into the lunchroom disgusted. This guy had taken a dump in a basin and then dumped the ginger ale over it and tried to tell her he had fecal vomiting. He obviously needed meds right now for the pain. I walk into his room and sure enough, a pile of poop in a puddle of ginger ale. I told him I'd have to take away his food and drinks and we'd have to put an NG down. Suddenly, he changed his tune. He admitted to faking it. Why do these people do what they do? ER nurse here. I was bringing a patient back to a room who said he had kidney stones. I had him stop at the bathroom and get a urine sample. Dude comes out with the specimen cup that literally has a piece of concrete in it. Looked him in the eye expecting some sort of joke. He was serious. I threw it away and walked this foolish man back to the waiting room to contemplate his stupidity. When I was a medical student, I worked in the pediatric side of the emergency room, and we would give popsicles to all the kids. One afternoon, an 8-year-old came in with his father, and I asked what was wrong. The kid couldn't remember what he had complained about to his dad, and the dad couldn't remember why he brought his kid in. The kid's mom was a nurse, and she worked at another hospital at the time, but she was the one that would keep track of all these things. Anyway, after a few minutes trying to figure out what was going on, the kid asked, "So can I have my popsicle now?" The kid was 100% healthy. Unfortunately, we reinforced bad behavior and both the kid and the dad subsequently left with popsicles. Years ago, I had a patient who had been rear-ended in an auto accident a few weeks before I saw her. She had a history of lupus. She was decked out in the usual I'm crippled paraphernalia. Crutches, neck brace, elbow braces, wrist braces, knee braces, all of it. And she could barely walk. I saw her a couple of times and she showed no improvement. One Saturday I was on call but had to take a backstreets route to the hospital because of an event taking place on the main thoroughfare. I apparently drove around her neighborhood because, wonders behold, she was wearing old lady spandex power walking down the sidewalk, holding weights in both hands. I didn't call her out. Next week, she was back at the clinic with her I'm crippled get up on again. A few weeks later, I got a subpoena for the deposition, and it all became clear. I'm a surgery resident. When I was on my trauma rotation, we had a patient come in after MVC with question that maybe the patient had seized and that had caused the accident. So he's in the trauma bay and starts shaking. The trauma nurse goes, "Oh, this isn't a real seizure." And the patient stops shaking, sits up, turns to the nurse and yells, "You don't know a thing about me." Prisoner came in with signs and symptoms of a big stroke. At that time, the protocol was to get a non-contrast head CT to rule out a bleed, and then give TPA, a powerful clot-busting drug that's only worth the risk if the benefit is to mitigate a major stroke. So that's what happened. Later in the course, he got a little carried away and started embellishing his story with symptoms that didn't make sense with his stroke diagnosis. And that's how we figured out he was faking it just to get some time away from jail. Can't say I blame him. At least he wasn't trying to escape. He just wanted to get out for a day, it sounds like. Massage therapists of Reddit, what are some of your most awkward or disgusting experiences with clients? Tell me all the weird crap you've dealt with. Then tell me if it's worth it making this career choice. My mother's been a massage therapist for over 20 years. She's in her 50s and she loves it. She massages a lot of elderly people and doesn't mind. She massages a few obese people and doesn't mind. To her, people are people, and she's not easily disgusted. But when people proposition her for sex, she minds. One particularly troubling encounter was when she was massaging a friend's husband, and he thought it would be appropriate to ask for sexual favors. I hope she went and told her friend about that afterwards, cause I'm sure she'd want to know. I had a very eccentric client, which is a nice way of saying creepy. They came into our clinic one day wanting a tui na massage. It's a type of Chinese massage. We usually leave the room to let the client strip down into their underwear before we commence. But with this guy, I had no chance to get away. Before I had time to give him a towel, he dropped his pants to reveal a sparkling blue G-string that barely kept everything in place. The guy was about 58, huge beer gut, gray hair, gold earring, and hairy like Robin Williams. As I started the massage, the guy started to tell me that he worked as an erotic masseuse specializing in body slide massage. This is where the masseuse gets oiled up and rubs his body and genitals all over before screwing the client at the end. The whole time I was massaging him, he kept telling me that I was really good with my hands. He also repeatedly told me how he was good at his job and plugging his business with a hinting tone. It was a very awkward session. Yeah, not the kind of job offer you want while working. I was getting a massage last week, and in the little room next to mine, there was a talkative older gentleman. He was chatting away to his massage therapist. Then it went quiet. After a little while, I heard him whisper, Do you do this for everyone? A large female client wanted focus on her glutes. Needless to say, I was farted on while she was asleep. Her own fart woke her up, and then she accused me of farting because there were trace amounts of fart still in the air. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant at the time, but now you have a funny story to tell. I've had clients ask if they could massage me, specifically my butt, while I was working on them. One woman tried to put her face in my crotch and told me she would love to lick me. For the record, I was wearing yoga pants as I'm also a yoga instructor. Many people are surprised at how strong I am and comment on it and how small my hands are. That's not odd. What was odd was the guy who followed that observation with telling me that I also had moved like a wolverine. Not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Former massage therapist here. I used to work in the YMCA in my hometown. There was a group of 4 older ladies around their early 50s that all played tennis together, and afterwards took turns getting massaged. At first, it was great. They were mostly doctors' wives, fairly easygoing and generous tippers to boot. But then things took a strange turn. One woman offered me a diamond tennis bracelet if I agreed to switch the order they were massaged in and did her first. I declined the gift but promised to use a rotating schedule in the future. She was fine at first, but slowly became more aggressive. She would beg and bribe me to extend her half hour for 10 or 15 minutes, in spite of her friends waiting. She constantly offered me expensive presents, shopping, home-cooked meals, all kinds of things I was uncomfortable accepting. The more I declined her offers, the weirder and edgier she seemed to get around me. Finally, I guess she got tired of beating around the bush and made an outright advance by grabbing my hand and forcing it onto her breast. I told her I was very flattered, but I wasn't interested in other women this way. She screamed, perfectly in range of all her friends and my coworkers to hear, about how I'd been leading her on for months, and how I didn't deserve any of her time and money. She berated my appearance and education before storming out the door naked and furious. I quit that day, started waiting tables, and never quite worked up the nerve to go back. Sounds like this woman was a little more invested in your relationship than you were. My mom is a massage therapist. She used to work out of our house. She had a studio downstairs where she would have people over for massages. One day, a woman who came over was probably in her late 60s. Oldish, slightly overweight woman. Now, my mom, as is standard procedure, asks this woman to disrobe and get under the covers while my mom waited outside. When she came back in after a few minutes after asking if the woman was done, the woman was standing in the middle of the room completely naked. The woman said, "Honey, I'm sure you've seen more than this in your day." She had not. That's not right. You're intentionally putting your masseuse in an uncomfortable situation. I'm sure they don't want to see any of their clients naked. I do it and I love it. I'm a guy, and I have to say there are some creepy phone calls, but that's about as bad as it gets. One guy asked exactly what kind of massage I did, which is a common precursor to do you do extras, and I clearly told him about Swedish massage. He said, "That's something my partner and I would be interested in," and asked, "And for the ladies, do you do sensual massage?" I find this euphemism so frustrating. It literally doesn't imply what they want to imply, but it's become recognized as a word for sexy time. I said no. He then said, "Could you?" I said, "No." Then follows a common awkward situation where we try and both pretend that he hasn't just asked me for some kind of sexual service in return for money, and finish the conversation as you might otherwise. This conversation and the time a rather lonely elderly gay man told me how much he appreciated having a pretty man take care of him were about the weirdest moments. Admittedly, when Mr. Lonely Gay Guy said that to me, I felt a bit gross, but also internally giggled, blushed, and said, "Aw, he thinks I'm pretty." For a fleeting moment, I considered a life as a wealthy boy toy of an aging thespian. My ticket into the high society of homosexual retirees. Feeling slightly jaded and ashamed of my life built on lies and sexual quid pro quo, but driven by the idea of inheriting his immaculate house and fortune. Then I remembered I was a bit far down the road of life for that change of tact, having married a woman, and I decided I would diminish and remain Galadriel in the West. But the weirdness is worth it. Swedish massage is a very fascinating practice based on Western medical understanding of human physiology. You'll learn words like desquamation and lymphatic. There are perks, like ladies paying you to touch their body. There is admittedly a slightly pervy pleasure when you're massaging someone really attractive, but it's seldom and balanced by your professionalism and the amount of slightly tubby men one deals with. And as a guy, I have a disproportionately high level of men, because women therapists won't see guys. It is great though, because men have more muscle, and that's the fun part for me. Getting deep into a thigh or shoulder and working the bits loose. It's truly the best job ever, though I often come home smelling like people. The absolute worst was a guy started touching himself while I was working on him. I have had one other guy proposition me, and one lady that was such a jerk that I ended the session because of what a jerk she was. I've been a therapist 5 years, and these are the only really awful things that have happened. Daily I help people. Daily I make people feel better. I'm sure that's the majority of the job. Of course there's going to be a couple of weird stories given the field, but I'd like to think for the most part they get to do their job the way they want to do it. I'm just gonna say prolapsed uterus and they could have warned me, and leave it right there for you to imagine the gaps. I had to suffer this image being put into my head, so now you guys do too. I just graduated in April and I've seen some things. There was a guy that would come to the campus clinic to get a massage from the students. Well, one day his cyst popped. Warm pus flew 3 feet and hit the curtain. Smelled like death. Oh, and then there was the job interview where it was made clear that their distinguished clients would pay for a little extra. How about a big bowl of nope? I'm a massage therapist, doing medical type work. My clients are all super nice, so not many awkward experiences, but I'll share 2. The first one, I came back to change the sheets after one client had gotten dressed and left, and found that she'd had some diarrhea on my table. Luckily, our laundry service treats all of our linens as biohazards anyway, but yuck. And second, I came into the room after washing my hands and letting my client get undressed, and she realized she hadn't been specific enough about how she'd injured her back. So she got up, stark naked, and proceeded to demonstrate the motion she'd been doing when she hurt herself. I wasn't disgusted, bodies don't scare me, but I definitely felt awkward. That's about it. I love my job. I definitely suggest going into massage therapy if you're compassionate and can handle a good amount of physically demanding work. If you're worried about sexual come-ons, stick to medical settings. If you're worried about bodily fluids and/or smells, go the spa route. My brother is a massage therapist for a side income and has tons of horror stories. One of the strangest ones is a man came into their studio, he shared one with others, and specifically asks for a man. Well, he's left in the room with the typical instructions, undress and get under the sheet. And when my brother comes in, the guy is sitting on a couch, cross-legged, naked as the day he was born. Anyway, weirds out my brother, who apologizes and asks him again to get under the sheet and leaves for about 5 minutes. He comes back and begins the massage. Apparently, this guy had a huge penis tattooed on his back and kept hinting for more. The guy even started slightly pulling the sheet off his butt with his hands, and saying things like, "It's just the 2 of us in here. What happens here stays here. I wouldn't say anything." Basically, all of this unnerved my brother a good bit, who was all too happy when the guy's time was up. But, like a champ, he continued to do massages, although they did add that guy to their watch list. I can only imagine all the stories behind the people on that watch list. I worked as a receptionist for a massage service facility. Every masseuse was licensed and the business was legit, but I guess having an all-Asian staff gave creepers the idea that we provide extra services. One day, a rather large white man requested one of our longest massages, 2-hour Swedish massage. I instructed him to disrobe and lie beneath the bedsheets while his massage therapist prepared for the massage. Hand-wrist stretching, hydrating, that kind of thing. Typical procedure. He seemed like a decent guy, so I wasn't expecting any trouble until the masseuse that had just entered the service room stumbled out backwards shouting profanities and slamming the door. Apparently, he was sitting stark naked at the edge of the bed with his wang out, upright, and at full attention. To make it worse, according to the masseuse, when she walked in and gave him a startled look, he gave her the creepiest smile and jumped off the bed as if to approach her. We threatened to call the police and he left, though he had already paid for his service, so too bad for him. I've been doing massage for 10 years, have worked on several military bases, Sedona and Lachlan. You see some strange tattoos, some really interesting scars, some insane back hair, and smell some pretty nasty feet. If you like helping people and aren't into it for the money, especially in this economy, then it's definitely worth it. That's probably your general experience as a massage therapist. Not a whole lot of creepy stuff necessarily, just some kind of gross stuff. I'm a beauty therapist and do massage too. I once had a girl roughly the same age as me in her 20s come in for a body massage as a present from her boyfriend. Whilst doing the massage, I could see the oil looked weird, like a streaky brownish color, And it smelt weird. Well, the client smelt weird. After the massage, we chatted for a bit and she mentioned she'd spent the morning fake tanning herself. I looked at my hands and they looked like I'd just dipped them in chocolate. So brown. I then had to explain to her that it wasn't the best idea to do that as she'd now be one streaky mess. Tan fail. I know some girls have had creepy guys in for massages in the past, but luckily I haven't. Nothing exciting to tell, I'm afraid. Although, one girl had a guy in for a massage, and when she told him the massage was over, he offered her a 21st special extras. She ran off crying. I was still in school and I was giving this guy a massage. Towards the end, he started shifting around a little and acting a bit awkward. I didn't think much of it and just went about finishing up. He'd said it was his first massage. As he exited the room, he got all shifty-eyed and awkward, and seemed a little embarrassed. He didn't want to talk to me. He just paid as quickly as he could and got out of there. I went back to change the sheets and there was a nice little present sitting under the top sheet. A shining little glob. I didn't know what it was, though I had an idea, so I leaned in to sniff it just to be sure. Yup, it's what I thought it was. The worst part? He didn't even tip. He just left something from his tip. That jerk. Why on earth would you smell it? I had a woman that had explosive diarrhea during the treatment. I didn't know what to do, so I just ran out of the room. That's probably the best thing you could have done. Female therapist here, and surprisingly, nothing too creepy or weird so far. I had this one client while still in school who really wanted extra focus work on his toes of all things. After spending my time on his toes, he wanted glute work. He pulled his tight shorty shorts down and bared his hairy bum. Not exactly what I was expecting, being so innocent and new to the field. Needless to say, I pulled his britches right back up. Since then, I've had a few clients make sexual references or try to give me hugs afterwards. No blatant, "Here's my penis, you know what to do with it." There have been a lot of boners though. Every day, all day. All I see is a clock and boners. Alas, I do love my job. It's easy, but hard work at the same time. Very rewarding. I think it depends on where you work, what area of town, and who you're employed by. But I personally love what I do. Yeah, at the end of the day, if this is the field you're looking to get into, just be careful where you work and who you work with more than anything else. Assuming you're trying to avoid these situations. A client came in unable to fully stand upright due to low back pain. I told her that I would likely need to work in the hip area, so she should probably remove her underwear. She then said, "Oh, well, I had an accident earlier today and I threw away my panties so I would be more comfortable leaving my pants on." I did the massage anyway, although my coworkers were telling me to refuse to do it. But I felt like if you've already pooped your pants that day, you'd probably feel even worse if someone refused to touch you because of it. However, at the time, I was assuming that she'd actually cleaned herself post-liquid poop. I massaged her back and did compressions on her glutes and hamstrings with her pants on, all while the smell of excrement wafted in my face. Then I noticed at the end of the massage that she had brown stains along the cuff of her pants. She gave me a nice tip, but I had to thoroughly bleach the entire room and sanitize everything after she left. But nothing can sanitize my brain. Physical therapist here, but we do massages a lot. Here's a few quick ones. A girl on her period without a tampon or pad who stunk like heck from body odor messed up the towel we put out for the patients. Next, a woman in her late 40s. I sent her into the room and said that I would follow after taking a short break to get something to drink. Upon entering the room, I found her completely naked doing the sexy look. I turned around and left. In a clinic for chronic pain therapy, a woman accused me of sexual abuse because I didn't want to give her a happy ending. Luckily, she confessed to the psychologist that she made it up. A patient with a polytrauma and a fixature extern fled naked out of the 3rd floor. We didn't know how to manage this. or even why he was running. And many more stories I just can't remember right now or would take too long to explain. But even those bad stories can't take down the positive effects of the job. Grateful people everywhere. My sister is a massage therapist, and one day while working at a very nice upscale spa, she noticed that the guy she was working on would not stay still. He kept wriggling around on the table and she kept having to ask him if he was okay and comfortable. He said he was fine and she would continue, only to have it go on. Finally, the massage is over and she leaves the room to let him get dressed. She waits a few minutes, then knocks on the door to see if he wants water or if he's ready to go pay. He tells her he's done and to come on in, and she walks into him touching himself on her massage table. Apparently, he'd been grinding on the table / trying to get some friction / touch himself, or who knows, while she was working on him. She had taken a break from massage for a while, but she's now back working at the same place, and she's already had people ask her for a happy ending. Needless to say, she's not really crazy about the profession anymore. That's just it. I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, this kind of thing is gonna happen because there are creeps. If it's not something you can handle, then I don't blame you. Massage therapist here. There are some pretty unfortunate clients. Ones that smell, ones that are really fat, ones that are really skinny. Massaging bone is harder than massaging fat. Awkward ones, really hairy ones, horny ones who leave stains on the sheets. But my most off-putting types of clients are the ones, usually older, with lots of dead skin, that once you start to massage them and do the motions with your hands, their skin, combined with the oil or cream, makes for a disgusting mixture that sticks to your hands and onto their skin. And you're just smearing it everywhere, and trying to fling it aside so you can get through the rest of the hour. That's the worst for me. This wasn't even something I had considered until this point, but ugh. Male massage therapist here. Back when I was in school, I was doing a clinic at the school. It was a pretty chill scene. A lot of us developed regulars and got into a routine. My nights were Tuesday nights, and one day I came in and noticed I had a whole list of my regulars in, including this older man that had been coming to the school for years and getting massages. Every week since starting, he would request me. Now, the school says they can't always get you the massage therapist you want, but they'll try. Every week, like clockwork, he would be my last client. At first, he was nice and social. Then, over the weeks, his questions got extremely personal, and despite my trying to avoid personal questions, he would keep asking. As well, over time, every time I would get him to turn over, he would be packing a major rager. This was usually the point where questions got more personal. One night, I finally had enough, as he began asking if I would ever give a special ending for a large tip. I calmly declined and approached one of my instructors the next day. She just nodded her head and offered to change my night I worked. Kinda feel like it needs to be a little more addressed than that, but hey, at least she got you out of there.
What fact are you just tired of explaining to people? That I'm not lonely or sad, I just like to spend time by myself. That being deaf really means I can't hear you at all. All the shouting doesn't help me to hear you. The difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Any type of diet, plants, or hocus-pocus voodoo isn't going to cure my cancer. It's a chromosome switch, so unless they can switch my chromosomes back into the right places, it's not happening. That reminds me of how, Steve Jobs died. Apparently he was a real believer in alternative medicine, and then he, got a transplant of an organ or something that he needed that he should have done at the very beginning, but then he wasted so much time on, alternative medicines that when he got the transplant, it just meant nothing. Correlation doesn't equal causation. I'm in IT. That does not mean I can single-handedly make a game or large-scale software. At the same time, I also cannot hack the Pentagon or release encrypted files from another hacker. Also, side note, while I was reinstalling Windows for you, I did not break your toaster and radio on opposite sides of the house and have no idea how to repair them or your microwave. Okay, thanks, bye.
Going up a tax bracket doesn't result in a pay cut. That having the money to buy something doesn't mean you can afford it. Oh boy, is that a good one, and oh boy, is that one that I'd hear from my mom a lot when I wanted toys as a kid. As a speech and language therapist, I'm responsible for somebody's safe swallow to prevent aspiration, pneumonia, or choking. There is more to my profession than teaching a child to stop stuttering. Gifts must be reported to the IRS if they are over 17 grand. Gifts over 12.92 million in the giver's lifetime are taxable, and the giver has to pay the tax. They tax gifts to avoid rich people dodging estate taxes by giving everything away before they die. ADHD is real. Adults can have it too, and it's not cured by a belt, just trying or cutting back on caffeine and sugar. It's actually very debilitating at times and is the primary contributor to a lot of problems that adults with it struggle with. It's extremely hard to find the help you need past a certain age because even the medical industry has a terrible understanding of adult ADHD. And no, not everyone is a little bit ADHD. Parts of the brain are literally underdeveloped due to lagging behind while developing. It literally prevents me from being able to redirect my attention and tune out background noises. It makes my default mode network, the part of the brain that chatters when you are at rest not doing anything, incessantly chatter in my head all day, every day. It makes the part of my brain responsible for inhibiting emotions or thoughts extremely difficult. It's mentally exhausting. It prevents the part of my brain responsible for motivation from functioning correctly. It's not laziness. It's literally my brain not being able to communicate with itself properly to get me to take action. And yes, it literally affects my mood and my displays of emotions. It's not bipolar. I just can't regulate how I show normal emotions effectively. If I blow up at you when you make me angry, it's not anger problems. I literally can't hold myself back unless I am getting the help I need to manage the ADHD. And yes, that means stimulant substances for me. No, it's not an illegal substance. Yes, it functions similar to that, but it calms me down because I am chronically understimulated and my brain takes over seeking stimulation, hyperactivity, chatter, daydreaming, etc. Stimulants put me on even footing with everyone else. I likely try harder than you every day with everything I do because I start the race with my feet tied and a mile behind the starting line. So stop telling me that I just don't try hard enough. And please educate yourself. ADHD is the most well-researched and studied disorder on Earth, and too many people don't believe it exists. No, it wasn't invented in the 70s by a man who said he made it up. There are over 200-year-old medical journals detailing it. The grandfather of medicine, Hippocrates, has writings describing patients that are believed to be the earliest recorded instances of ADHD, and the treatment he gave them line up with herbs, vitamins, and minerals that tend to help ADHD the most. And that's from the 4th century BC. It's not a made-up problem from 50 years ago.
That all checks out. I've got ADHD. It does suck some days, but it also affects people wildly differently.
That awful poor planning on their part does not constitute an emergency on mine.
That most recycling ends up in the landfill. You are not being environmentally friendly just because you recycle. Reducing and reusing are much, much better for the environment. Recycling is the last resort. Only one small step up from garbage. The importance of privacy, why governments and companies should not spy on us unless when the people whose data is stolen are not citizens of their country. And together with the above, not because someone posts things on the internet and has a public life, does it give others the right to interfere in their private life. That just because I'm black does not mean that I'm an expert or the go-to guy on all things African American. Seriously. Along those lines, I can like a woman who's not black because of qualities she has that have nothing to do with her skin color or ethnic background, or not like a black woman because of the same things. If she's from Mumbai and would actually listen to me argue with someone why Professor X could use his mental blast to take out a Mark II Sentinel and get me another beer instead of head for the door, why does it matter what her hair color is or where her people are from? She likes me enough to put up with my BS. Why should I look for someone that you think I should be with to make you happy with who should be with whom? Just saying. This sounds like a rather personal matter. I'm sorry that your mother is maybe racist and unable to see that you've maybe made a actual connection with someone.
I'm not Chinese. I don't speak Vietnamese or Chinese. Yes, I'm Irish.
18 years of reinforced go to college and you'll get a good job growing up has led to an entire generation of adults who are on average more educated than prior generations when the number of jobs that would actually require those educations have not really increased in any significant number. So now, more roles that don't actually need the education can still ask for it and get candidates with that education requirement applying because they can't get anything else. Add on the fact that that tuition rates have been increasing at a much higher rate than inflation since at least the 80s, while Uncle Sam happily foots the upfront costs and you wind up with a generation of people with significant debt making less than their expected income that can't afford to pay it off. Don't forget to add in that public schools don't, or at least didn't about 15 years ago when I graduated, have any mandatory classes to teach about loans in general, student loans, interest, etc. So kids signed up for these loans with only a very vague idea of what they were signing up for. And finally, even if Biden's debt forgiveness passes, which I hope it does, as it will definitely help people, it will still do nothing to address the underlying issue and actually solve any problem. It will just put a band-aid over the issue for another year.
Now, I by no means have a horse in the American political race, and you're the one who brought it up, but I just thought I'd ask. How's Vote Blue no matter who working out for you?
That you are responsible for your own actions.
Just because something offends you doesn't mean it's gotta go.
The McDonald's coffee lawsuit lady was very justified in winning her case. Longitude and latitude and GPS and how it simply would not work if the earth was flat.
That you don't have to be white to be racist. There are non-white racists too. To add to that, 1, there's no reverse racism, it's just racism. And 2, just because you're black doesn't mean you're not racist towards black people. That's literally the point of characters like Uncle Ruckus.
Stop setting yourself up for failure because you demand perfection. Actually accomplishing something to a B+ level is infinitely better than having not done it. Can't clean the kitchen until it's spotless under a microscope? Cool. Load up the dishwasher until it's full and run it. Way better than living in filth. Can't stick to a 5-day-a-week workout and super healthy diet? Fine. Do twice a week and cut out the 3 worst foods and you'll be massively ahead of where you were.
Basically, incremental improvements in your life will eventually lead to larger scale improvements in your life. I once heard that apparently you need to stick to something for about 30 days in a row before you just start doing it automatically with ease.
The vast majority of religious believers cringe just as hard as you do and wish the loud extremist minority would go away and shut up just like you. It's a shame that so many people assume first which religion and second that these discussions don't already take place within the communities of these religions. They do. The difference is neither side is smart enough to realize that screaming your belief into others' faces will never actually work. It only makes you the savage you think you are disagreeing with. And it really sucks that I need to extrapolate on this, because people still want to assume the worst and shout their beliefs into another's face. I mean, there are morally reprehensible people in any kind of group you can name, social, religious, whatever, but the fact of the matter is, the world would be a whole lot better if people would just come out and say, yes, there are morally reprehensible people in our groups and we all need to work together to call those people out and hopefully make the world a better place, and we can all maybe learn to tolerate each other just a little bit more than we have been lately. Censoring speech is the first step towards oppression of all society.
That unlikely things do happen, such as people getting lucky or someone bragging about something unique. It appears as if lots of people stubbornly live under a rock and refuse to accept the fact that everyone has a life of their own. The 8 billion people on this planet do not exist as carbon copies of your life.
That you can disagree with someone and still be friends. You can also have different political beliefs and be friends. Opinions are not facts. That intention does not negate impact.
That touching a baby animal won't make the parents reject it. It's an old wives' tale / myth to keep children from messing with wild baby animals.
I still see so many people argue about this. I'm not sure if it is true or not. Some people say it is, some people say it isn't. I mean, the people that say it is true actually give examples.
Feminism is equality and against bias towards genders. It doesn't mean to hate men. That is the opposite of the definition of feminism.
I am Sikh, not Muslim.
Those are your dog's nipples. Yes, male dogs have nipples. The laws of supply and demand apply to labor, so you can't import millions of people without driving wages down. Han shot first.
It's been ages since I saw the original cut of Star Wars, and it's so weird that they change it with each iteration that they decide to pump out or whatever, but it makes him a more interesting character if he shoots first, rather than waiting to be attacked.
Micro pigs aren't real. It's just a starved pot-belly pig.
Gonna get buried, but just chipping in, there is a massive difference to listening and waiting your turn to talk. Most people are waiting for their turn to talk, interrupt soon as a thought comes into their mind, or only latch onto one small thing that they heard and ignore the rest. The worst people are those who just try to drown out your voice by talking louder than anyone else. Listening is a valuable skill. Please learn to listen.
That innocent until proven guilty is a legal concept. It means while being tried in a court of law, the judge or jury need to be unbiased and believe the person is innocent until the burden of proof is met. It does not mean the person is actually innocent. If I see someone commit a crime, I don't have to say they are innocent until convicted. I know they did it. A person can absolutely be guilty, but the legal burden was not met. And again, that does not mean they should be treated as though they did not do it outside of the justice system.
Just because I'm old doesn't mean I'm out of touch. My son's trans and I've supported his transition. Also came out as bisexual at the age of 58. A lot of us old folks want to see the change you kids are going to make in the world.
Politics isn't simple like you think it is. There are no simple answers. That all dating apps are designed to get money from you and that they don't care if you find anyone. They prey on those who are weak, who think spending money will help them find dates. Dating apps have ruined people's self-esteem and dating in general. It's true, a large swath of society needs to readjust and, try and take part in actual human contact to find partners again. Like, if you regularly use dating apps, that's fine, but honestly, it doesn't really prepare you for, conversational skills in person or anything like that, which are very, very critical. Every generation has its share of greedy buttholes and grifters. Things aren't going to magically get better when the boomers all die. That the 2020 election was fair and not stolen. Electric cars won't save us from climate change, and we've been duped by car manufacturers. We need walkable cities yesterday.
That just because the research study reports a statistic does not mean it is generalizable to the entire population. Most research studies are done on a population in a given area. The area then are typically randomized to get a sample from that population. That means that if a researcher is doing a study and uses one specific country, state, job, place, or whatever, they are only studying that specific population, which implies that if you were to do that study on a different population in a different place, there could be very different results based on the different demographics of that specific population. For example, if you were to do a study on the average political beliefs of people in the southern states, you cannot imply that the results would be the same as the average political beliefs of people in the northern states. Most people who perform research or are knowledgeable and have taken a class in statistics are aware of this. However, I know many people who just raffle off a statistic that clearly supports their specific opinion or belief, without looking at all the other research that may have disproven that said finding, or they don't realize that the one statistic is only specific to one population.
Nuclear energy is a waste of time and a colossal waste of money.
Pollution from coal power kills more people every day than nuclear has in its entire history.
That life isn't a bunch of dichotomies and extremes. I can consider Donald Trump to be the worst president in U.S. history and still not vote for or even like Joe Biden. I can recognize that Maryland's SB 0001 is a dumb law and still not be a long-range killing device lover. I can prefer to eat my pizza without pineapples and still not think that pepperoni is the only acceptable pizza topping. This is literally the best answer in this entire goddamn thread. My god, this topic is a bit of a down and I have to comment on every now and then because a lot of this stuff is just like opinion-based, or they're only saying 1 to maybe 8-word answers that I don't really want to extrapolate on. That anxiety is not just all in your head. Yes, there is a damn rule that stops everybody from playing basketball, or more accurately, there's no rule that allows it, and basketball rules are a list of what you can do. Anything not included is prohibited.
The ducks at the park are free. Because my dad is a math teacher doesn't make me automatically good at maths.
So, my name is Maurice, and ever since Madagascar came out, I keep having to explain to people that Mort is the one with the foot fetish, not Maurice. Your migraine headache is not a migraine. When I have a migraine, my head doesn't just hurt. My pupils dilate so uncontrollably, I effectively go blind, vomit uncontrollably, piercing neck pain, and occasionally I hallucinate. Yeah, I cannot stress enough how, different a migraine is to a headache. It's true. Frankenstein was the goddamn doctor! There is a difference between an excuse and an explanation. Also, that most times, effect carries more weight than intent. That first part, right? So I'll mess up in some way and I'll be like, yeah, totally my fault, I did this and that, and they'll be like, no, stop making excuses. What are you talking about? I'm taking the blame. I'm just explaining how it happened. The phrase is, I couldn't care less. Saying, I could care less opposes the point you are trying to make. That not every evergreen tree is a pine tree. Some of them are spruce, cedar, fir, or even tamaracks. Homeless and unhoused can't just get a job. There's so many factors that are unaddressed in that ignorance. Atheism is not Satanism. If I don't believe in your imaginary friend, why would I believe in your imaginary enemy? The left lane is for passing, not cruising.
The president doesn't control the gas prices.
That is absolutely true. And yet the decisions made by an incompetent, quote-unquote, leader of the free world can ripple and change the world exponentially. Frankly, I just wish it was never always down to some stupid two-party system. I'm gay myself. I get stupid questions, like if I have ever tried being straight, or insecure women who think I want their men, or insecure men who think I want them, etc. Rinse and repeat. It's not the most interesting aspect of who I am. In fact, I don't think it's interesting at all. I can't decorate. I don't know crap about fashion. I'm just a regular guy who happens to occasionally date other guys. Currently single. I'm fine with that. Now, just because the fact doesn't agree with your political statement doesn't make it any less true. Doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you are on.
Just because I have ADHD doesn't mean I can't sit still for an extended period of time. ADHD affects different people differently.
Well, it certainly makes it difficult for me to sit still for an extended period of time. The Dark Side of the Moon is a Pink Floyd album. The moon no more has a dark side than the Earth does. It has days and nights, 2 weeks long. It does have a far side. The entire medical profession, or at least the 98th percentile, misunderstands addiction. Alcoholism, gambling, sex, illegal substances, overeating, even religion. Any of them. Doesn't matter. The medical profession thinks the reason the patients are addicted is, number one, they don't understand the harm they're doing to their bodies and society. If we could just explain it to them, they'd stop. No, we understand. We're under siege with pamphlets, after-school specials, news programs, medical personnel telling us, plus a billion advertisements, MADD, and such on the harm it causes. Number two, it's just a lack of willpower. No, it's not a lack of willpower. Lots of very high-functioning people in other aspects of their lives, heads of industry, CEOs of corporations, and very successful sports, football people also suffer from addiction. Number three, they're living the dream already and just want to experiment to see how much better life can be. No, sorry, not that one either. Well, maybe if you're 16 to 18 and life is wonderful, that's true, but it's not true for anyone over 30 to 90 years old. For most of the people with addiction problems, life sucks beyond the imagining, and they just want to have the tiniest bit of control to dull the pain to a manageable level. Dr. Sarah.
Bob, I've explained all the advantages and disadvantages to you. I really think you ought to agree to the skin grafts to fix your burns. Do you not understand the harm that could happen if we don't deal with this? Do you not have the willpower to survive the operation and recovery?
Bob. No, Dr. Sarah, that's not my problem. My problem is that I still live in the house and the frickin' house is still on fire. If we go through the pain and expense of the skin graft, 5 minutes later, I'll be right back in the same circumstances that put me here in the first place. And if by some miracle you can convince Dr. Sarah that your life won't ever change to get you out of the fire, they fall back on the,
well, then why are you whining about it? Why don't you do something to get out of the fire?
Because, Dr. Sarah, my grandfather has Alzheimer's, my mother has stage 4 inoperable pancreatic cancer, my son, little Timmy, is severely autistic, and daughter, Betty Sue, has incurable Parkinson's. Which of those 4 problems can you fix for me, Doc, to reduce the stress and pain in my life to a manageable level? The entire medical profession doesn't understand that addiction isn't about the thing you're addicted to, or the effect it has on you or other people's lives. It's usually about medicating unsolvable problems to a bearable level, and until everyone understands the problem, we have no hope of solving it. Why forums like these make me really angry when they just become a moan fest for people with insecurities, faux depression, and other mental disorders they want the whole world to know about. This person is totally right, but, everyone needs some method of getting their frustrations out. Both political parties in the US are just as corrupt and self-serving. Most, if not all, high-ranking politicians have lost touch with what it is to be the average human being. They pander to us, put us against each other, and pretend the other party is the enemy and they truly want to make life better for us. They don't give a crap about us. They think they're royalty and we're all peasants. When American politics comes up, I always think about the Stampy the Elephant episode of The Simpsons where it goes on a rampage and it goes to the Republic Convention Center and there are banners hung up all saying, "We want what's worse for everyone. We're just plain evil." And then it goes to the Democrat Convention Center and it says, "We hate life and ourselves and we can't govern." This one was honestly so hard to goddamn sift through because it was all just political opinions or people complaining about their chronic health issues. I was hoping for more scientific facts facts or myths and stuff that people like come up with.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.